Chapter 4883. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth had been changing for hundreds of years, and every sect had tried to do something about it. Even a small sect like the Chanha sect had tried to change it, so how could other powerful sects not do anything about it? Now that old man Jiyu Cheong and Ji Yang Zhenren were so enthusiastic about the Yi family's cultivation techniques, dozens of late-stage tribulation-passing cultivators could no longer sit still. They took out their modified cultivation techniques and disciple selection methods and handed them to old man Jiyu Cheong, hoping to exchange them with the Yi family's cultivation technique. Old man Jiyu Cheong wasn't in a hurry. He read every cultivation technique he obtained and then recited it in a loud voice. Not to mention the cultivators on the treetop, even Xian Xiaozi could hear him clearly. Unfortunately, Xian Xiaozi was only envious. He knew that although the fallen immortal sect was the biggest sect in the Fengyang kingdom, it was nothing compared to the other sects. That day, Xian Xiaozi had also tried it. He was only waiting for the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's turn to offer the jade slips so that he could obtain better cultivation techniques and secret techniques. The Yilin continent was indeed the place where the Dao sect was at its peak. Not to mention the Heaven Alliance that was on par with the Dao Alliance, just the Dao Alliance's tribulation-passing cultivators' methods of selecting disciples covered almost every aspect of the Dao sect's cultivation. In addition to the previous bone sifting and pulse distinguishing, there were also secret techniques such as physique observation, spirit observation, heart observation, sea exploration, palace extraction, and so on. These secret techniques examined the cultivator's physique, bloodline, heart, meridians, lower dantian, and Niwen Palace to find out the differences in their disciple. In fact, there were different methods and different incantations for each of the secret techniques, such as observing one's appearance and spirit. There were all kinds of strange and bizarre techniques. It took old man Jiyu Cheong 10 days to explain the secret arts and cultivation methods of the crossing tribulation stage cultivators. While old man Jiyu Cheong was explaining, the other cultivators were also copying and comprehending the secret arts and cultivation methods. They didn't really need to comprehend the cultivation methods, they just wanted to see what other cultivators thought of and see if there were any unique paths. Although there were dozens of cultivation methods, they were able to see them all in 10 days. When old man Jiyu Cheong finished explaining the last jade slip, he copied it and distributed it to the rest of the cultivators. Some of them looked disappointed, while others looked happy. There were all kinds of expressions on their faces. On the other hand, old man Jiyu Cheong, who was the alliance master, remained calm and confident. Sure enough, after Ji Yang finished reading the last jade slip, he asked old man Jiyu Cheong with a smile, "Master Alliance, we've all taken out the secret techniques and cultivation techniques of our sects. Please don't keep them to yourself." Cough, cough. Old man Jiyu Cheong coughed and said with a smile, "This old man is older than all of you, and his cultivation is slightly stronger than yours. But what you think, this old man can also think of. But how can what this old man can think of compare to what you all can think of? This old man has also considered the method of selecting disciples, but after thinking about it, I feel that regardless of whether it is the secret technique of my Dao sect, it seems to be affected by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Under this change, it is unlikely to find a reliable method. If I want to change, I can only rely on external forces. Therefore, I gave up on the Dao sect spells and began to think of other methods." Ji Yang Immortal was surprised again and asked anxiously, "Alliance Master, are you talking about the Heavenly Alliance's primordial spirit technique?" "That's right." Old man Jiyu Cheong nodded and said, "As the saying goes, stones from other mountains can be used to polish jade. Since the primordial spirit technique can stand tall in the Heavenly Alliance, there must be something special about it. Therefore, I looked for some cultivation techniques in this area and studied them carefully. Then, after spending 100 years of effort, I finally found a method of selecting disciples called origin selection." With that, old man Jiyu Cheong took out dozens of jade slips that he had copied and waved his hand to show them to the cultivators. Ji Yang Zhenren could not wait any longer. He picked up the jade slip and immersed his spiritual force into it. A moment later, Ji Yang Zhenren said in surprise, "Alliance Master, you're saying that Sky Illumination Palace used this method to select 50,000 disciples, and 30% of them have cultivated to foundation establishment. That's right. Old man Jiu Cheong nodded and said, although 30% is still a lot less than usual, it's still much better than the current method of selecting disciples. Moreover, I think, the reason why the other disciples can't cultivate to the foundation establishment stage is because there is a problem with the cultivation technique that I modified. If I use the Yi family's cultivation technique as a reference, I'm confident that I can raise 30% of the disciples to 50%. Good, good, good. Ji Yang Immortal clapped his hands and said, 50% is already very high. Now, only 10% of the disciples selected by the Chongxi sect can cultivate. However, if we recruit all the disciples, we don't have that many disciples to teach. With your secret technique, we won't have to worry about anything in the future. Haha, don't worry. Old man Jiu Cheong chuckled and pointed to the area under the tree. There are 81 immortal alliances in the Tao Alliance, and each of them has many cultivation sects and families. Although their cultivation realms may not be as good as ours, they might have unique secret techniques. Of course, Ji Yang Immortal naturally thought that old man Jiu Cheong was talking to the cultivators of the other immortal alliances. He didn't believe that there were cultivators in the Tao Alliance who were more knowledgeable than old man Jiu Cheong and himself, who could create a more effective and unique secret technique. Ji Yang Immortal was not surprised. Although half of the cultivators from the 23 countries, 65 sects, 17 families, and 8 itinerant cultivators of the Luo Hong Immortal Alliance shared their secret techniques, and 2 families even modified their cultivation techniques, these secret techniques were too crude and didn't catch Ji Yang Immortal's attention. However, Ji Yang Immortal still ordered these cultivators to make copies of the secret techniques and give them to the Alliance Master of the Luo Hong Immortal Alliance, Ji Yang Immortal Alliance, Ji Yang Immortal Alliance. He also said some words of encouragement before he allowed the Chongxi Immortal Alliance to share the secret techniques. Seeing that Ji Yang allowed the Luo Hong Immortal Alliance, which was the closest to the Heaven Alliance, to share the secret techniques, Xian Xiaozi knew that it would be the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's turn several weeks later. As he listened to the secret techniques, he took out the storage ring that Huang Shu had given him and checked it with his divine will. The more he looked, the more he felt happy and worried. He was happy because Huang Qiong's spiritual master's remains and belongings were all in the storage ring. Even the heavenly cycle demon subduing star array's array flags were not missing. This would be extremely helpful to his future cultivation and the fallen immortal sect's strength. He was worried because even Huang Qiong's spiritual master couldn't pass the lightning tribulation, so how could he compare with him? How could he pass the lightning tribulation and enter the tribulation transcendence stage? Moreover, even if he entered the tribulation transcendence stage, these late-stage and mid-stage tribulation transcendence stage cultivators couldn't escape the clutches of the heaven and earth spiritual qi mutation. How could he survive? Chapter 4884. Sigh. Xian Xiaozi sighed and kept all the items. He thought to himself, it's better to be practical. Let's listen to how the other sects choose their disciples. Even if I can't pass the tribulation, I can't let the fallen celestial sect continue to decline in my hands. With that thought in mind, Xian Xiaozi's divine thought was about to leave his body. However, at that moment, he caught sight of the lone jade slip in his storage ring. Instantly, Xian Xiaozi recalled Huang Shu's words and expression. His heart skipped a beat as he seemed to have understood something. He knew a lot about Huang Shu's character, and knew that if there was nothing important, this guy would never make a trip to Night Wind Valley with such great fanfare. Although the Royal Dome Spiritual Master's relic was important, why would Huang Shu leave a jade slip in his storage ring if there was nothing more important? Xian Xiaozi took out the jade slip and inserted his divine thought into it. As soon as Xian Xiaozi saw it, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. In fact, he almost jumped up from the tree leaf. How is this possible? The Chanhe sect has a spiritual root selection technique? Xian Xiaozi exclaimed. Maybe, there's even a modified technique. 10 disciples of the Conscian Hall, including Zhe Jun, went missing because of this. Suddenly, Alliance Master Wen Jie's voice rang in Xian Xiaozi's ears. Xian Xiaozi of the Fallen Celestial Sect, does your Fallen Celestial Sect have a spiritual root selection technique? Huh? Xian Xiaozi was stunned. He looked at Wen Jie in confusion and asked, Alliance Master Wen, why is it my fallen celestial sect's turn so soon? Hehe, Xian Xiaozi, you must be distracted. Yu Jiangling whispered, after the Lu Hong Celestial Alliance, it was the Lofty Creek Celestial Alliance's turn. The Alliance Master saw that the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects were similar and there was nothing new. If he were to list them one by one, wouldn't it take more than 10 days? He asked the Alliance Masters to collect the spiritual root selection techniques of the various sects and clans. If there's nothing new, there's no need to report it. Of course, if there's anything new, the Alliance Master said that he'll reward you handsomely. Xian Xiaozi? Wen Jie smiled. If the fallen celestial sect doesn't have anything to try, don't force yourself. Temph, he's only at the late body integration stage. What secret technique could he possibly have? Li Pan couldn't see through the sect leader and the family head. Seeing this, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Hee hee. Xian Xiaozi looked at Li Pan with disdain as well and laughed coldly. How could a rogue cultivator like you know the true strength of the fallen immortal sect? Even though you're already at the early stage of the great vehicle stage, you can't compare to the foundation of the fallen immortal sect. As he spoke, Xian Xiaozi stood up and raised his hand. Lord Alliance Leader, I have a spirit root selection method here. It seems to be quite unique, and I can provide you with a reference. Although Daoist Ji Yang and Old Man Jiu Cheung were a little disappointed, they still kept their eyes on the Alliance meeting. When they saw the group of cultivators passing the jade slips to their Alliance Master in an orderly manner, a cultivator at the edge of the group stood up and immediately pricked up their ears. Spiritual roots. Ji Yang and Old Man Jiu Cheung were stunned and looked at each other in confusion. Old Man Jiu Cheung asked pleasantly, Who are you? What is this spiritual root you're talking about? After Old Man Jiu Cheung spoke, the Alliance meeting fell silent again. Apart from the cultivators who were passing the jade slips to the Alliance Master, everyone's eyes fell on Xian Xiaozi. Xian Xiaozi took a deep breath and replied, I'm Xian Xiaozi from the fallen immortal sect of the Tsupu Immortal Alliance's Fengyang Kingdom. I've obtained a secret technique for selecting disciples called the spiritual root selection method. Although I haven't fully comprehended it, I feel that although this secret technique is profound, it's simple and easy to learn. Moreover, it's very likely that there's a cultivation technique that's related to this spiritual root selection method. Oh, so you obtained it. You didn't comprehend it yourself. Old Man Jiu Cheung smiled and was about to say something when he suddenly realized that Xian Xiaozi's secret technique wasn't worth his time. However, if Xian Xiaozi obtained it from someone else, it might be of some value. Hence, his smile disappeared and he hurriedly asked, What is this spiritual root? How did you obtain this cultivation technique? Alliance Master, I can't see what this spiritual root is. Moreover, the cultivation technique doesn't mention what this spiritual root is. Xian Xiaozi's forehead was covered in sweat when he realized that he didn't answer this question. He hurriedly replied, It said that this cultivation technique was comprehended by a senior who went into seclusion before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. Oh, he created this secret technique when he came out of seclusion and saw the change in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Who? Which fellow Daoist? Ji Yang couldn't help but ask. Senior Zhong Xiaohua. Huang Shu naturally learned Xiaohua's name from Yu Zhuohong and recorded the entire process in detail in the jade slip. Huang Shu didn't dare to hide anything from Yu Zhuohong. Boom. Before Ji Yang could speak, most of the cultivators laughed. Not only because they had never heard of a senior with this name, but also because this name was too rustic. It didn't sound like the name of a senior expert at all. However, Ji Yang didn't laugh. Old Man Jiu Cheung didn't laugh either. Even the tribulation-passing cultivators on the tree crown didn't laugh. The reason was simple. Even though Xian Xiaozi was not a high-level cultivator, he was still the sect leader of a sect. Many of the methods to select disciples had already appeared in the Dao Alliance, and Xian Xiaozi must have heard of them. Now that he was able to come up with a selection method that even he himself could not explain, it meant that either the selection method was a castle in the sky, a mere pretense, or it was a unique method of its own. As for the name, it was just a few words. Who would take it seriously? Old man Jiu Cheong had a premonition that only tribulation-transcending cultivators would have. He even had a feeling that there was always a way out. Suppressing the surprise in his heart, he asked aloud, Xian Xiaozi, are you sure you don't know what this spiritual route is? And can this spiritual route really select disciples? Of course, I'm very sure. Xian Xiaozi nodded and said, this spiritual route is completely different from the bone sifting and origin sifting. I can't understand it at all. As for the selection of disciples, I only know that the Chanhe sect of the Fengyang kingdom used this secret technique to select thousands of disciples. Buzz. This time, the commotion didn't come from other places but from the tree crown. Apart from the Yi clan's patriarch, Ji Yang Zhenren, and old man Jiu Cheong, the other tribulation-passing cultivators couldn't help but whisper among themselves. They didn't know what kind of sect the Chanhe sect was. However, even though it was an unknown sect, it was still able to select thousands of disciples when the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. Regardless of what kind of cultivation method they had, this number was still shocking. The Yi clan's patriarch glanced at old man Jiu Cheong and said, Xian Xiaozi, how are the talents of these thousands of disciples? How's their cultivation progress? Xian Xiaozi said respectfully, Senior, I don't know. I only received a message from my disciple, Huang Shu, before I entered the Alliance conference. Recently, about a month ago, the disciples of the Chanhe sect discovered the location where the fallen immortal sect's spiritual master Huang Qiong failed to transcend the tribulation near the western wild mountain range of the Fengyang kingdom. They met Senior Zhong Xiaohua, who had just come out of seclusion. Then, Senior Zhong Xiaohua temporarily stayed in the nebula ridge of the Chanhe sect and taught the Chanhe sect the method of selecting spirit roots. According to Yu Zhuohong of the Chanhe sect, Senior Zhong promised to modify the cultivation method for Liu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Chanhe sect. However, Liu Hanhuan was afraid of getting into trouble and didn't dare to agree. I think these disciples who were selected haven't cultivated yet. Haha, I see. Wanderer Fu Bo laughed. It's just a cultivation method that hasn't been tested yet. It really gave me a shock. I really didn't expect that there would be a cultivator more powerful than Senior Jiu Cheong in the Yilin continent who could create a more miraculous method than the origin sifting. Oh! In that case, Huang Qiong Zhenren, who was the first to fail the tribulation, has already been found. Perfected Ji Yang was disappointed when he heard that. He no longer wanted to find out more about the method to select spiritual roots and changed the topic. Vice Alliance Leader, that's indeed the case. Xian Xiaozi replied. However, I haven't looked into it in detail. If I find anything valuable, I'll pass it to Alliance Leader Wen Jie of the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. He'll pass it on to the Dao Alliance. Great. Perfected Ji Yang smiled. Make a copy of the Jade Slip with the method to select spiritual roots and pass it to Wen Jie. After he passes it on to the Dao Alliance, if it's useful, I'll definitely severely injure the fallen immortal sect. Yes, I understand. Xian Xiaozi had achieved his goal when he heard that his name had reached Perfected Ji Yang's ears. He looked at Wen Jie, whose face was filled with gratitude, and was about to make a copy of the Jade Slip. At that moment, an unhappy voice said impatiently, Xian Xiaozi, tell me about the secret method to select spiritual root. That voice belonged to old man Jiu Cheong. He had wanted to take the Jade Slip from Xian Xiaozi's mouth, but Wanderer Fu Bo and Perfected Ji Yang had interrupted him, so he couldn't say anything. Seeing that Perfected Ji Yang was looking down on Xian Xiaozi, he couldn't help but speak up. Perfected Ji Yang was stunned and shook his head with a bitter smile. He really didn't think much of it because he felt that old man Jiu Cheong didn't care about the affairs of the Dao Alliance and didn't know what the cultivators of the Dao Alliance were thinking. Xian Xiaozi's actions were clearly trying to please the crowd. Xian Xiaozi was naturally even happier. He glanced at Li Pan proudly and took out the Jade Slip. He immersed his divine thought into it and read, word by word, those who possess spiritual roots are the roots of the heaven and earth bell spirit in the cultivator's body. They can contain the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and form spiritual cavities for the cultivator's use. This is the method to select the spiritual roots. Chapter 4885. Xian Xiaozi's voice was neither fast nor slow as he explained the spiritual root selection method that Xiao Hua had given to the Chanhe sect. The cultivation method was not very long, but it covered the 5 elemental spiritual roots of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and even the wind, thunder, ice, and other mutated spiritual roots. It even included the obscure light and darkness spiritual roots that no one had ever heard of before. As Jiyu Qiong old man listened, his expression changed drastically. He opened his mouth several times, wanting to speak, but he held himself back. When Xian Xiaozi finally finished, Jiyu Qiong old man immediately shouted, "Ji Yang, quick, bring this jade slip to me at all cost." Okay. Ji Yang was naturally fascinated. Regardless of whether Xiao Hua's spiritual root selection method was correct or not, Ji Yang could tell from the completeness and rigor of the cultivation method that it was not something that could be created in a few days or months. It was also not something that his or Jiyu Qiong old man's cultivation method could compare to. He nodded and pressed down on the tree trunk below him. With a loud bang, the crown of the tree shook violently. Clusters of dark green light appeared all over the tree like the brilliance of the moon and stars. These lights did not appear from top to bottom in an orderly manner, nor did they appear from Ji Yang to Xian Xiaozi. Instead, they appeared from the roots, branches, and trunk in a disorderly manner. In the end, a branch that was extremely far away from Xian Xiaozi trembled rapidly, and an extremely dazzling halo appeared like a star. At the same time, a palm-sized whirlpool suddenly appeared on the branch in front of Xian Xiaozi. Black and white threads of light appeared from the whirlpool, and waves of desolate coldness emanated from it. At this moment, Ji Yang's voice came from the whirlpool. "Xian Xiaozi, quickly put the jade slip in. My lifespan is starting to run out." "Yes, senior." Xian Xiaozi was shocked and did not dare to delay. He hurriedly threw the jade slip into the whirlpool. Whoosh! The moment the jade slip landed on the branch, a dark green light flashed, and the whirlpool quickly disappeared. The dazzling star in the distance also dimmed. Whoosh! When the light on the Tree of Alliances was extinguished, Daoist Ji Yang raised his hand. In his hand was the jade slip that Xian Xiaozi had placed in the vortex. Hearing this, Daoist Ji Yang let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly. "I'm ashamed. It's just retrieving a jade slip through the Dao tree, and I am already somewhat powerless." "Hihi, fellow Daoist Ji Yang has already done well." The Yi clan patriarch laughed. "Don't be fooled by how short this distance is. Fellow Daoist, this divine ability of yours has already traversed nearly half of the Yilin continent. In the entire Dao Alliance, you are probably the only one with such power." Alas! Old man Jiyu Qiong sighed. The change in spiritual energy is a great tribulation of heaven and earth, and we have no choice but to face it. Ji Yang Zhenren nodded and waved the jade slip in his hand. "The great Dao is just. There will always be a way for people to survive. Although the world's spirit energy has only been here for a few hundred years, we can't find a way to survive. The further we go, the more helpless we will be. I hope this so-called spiritual root selection method can help us find a glimmer of hope. Ji Yang, take a look at this." Old man Jiyu Qiong calmed down when he saw the jade slip. He smiled and said, "I only listened to it once and didn't think about it carefully. However, it seems that this is indeed a complete cultivation method and not something that was randomly made up." "You're right, senior." Ji Yang Zhenren nodded and said, "I've noticed it too. Although this cultivation method is marvelous, the incantation is easy to understand. Even nascent soul cultivators and golden core cultivators can practice it, let alone us. It's very similar to the disciple selection method that my Dao sect usually uses." Ji Yang Zhenren didn't stand on ceremony and scanned the jade slip with his divine sense. Listening to Xian Xiaozi recite it once and scanning it with his divine sense was different. Ji Yang Zhenren's expression was grave as he scanned the jade slip. After a few minutes, he withdrew his divine sense and took out a blank jade slip without hesitation. He copied the cultivation method in it and handed it to old man Jiyu Qiong. He said in a low voice, "Senior, take a look. I seem to see something in this cultivation method." Ji Yang Zhenren didn't finish his sentence. He looked at Xian Xiaozi and said loudly, "Xian Xiaozi, You've done a great service to the Tao Alliance. Needless to say, the Tao Alliance will reward you handsomely after this. Yes, yes. Xian Xiaozi was overjoyed. He had already seen the importance of this cultivation method from how much old man Jiyu Qiong valued it. The reward was beyond his expectations. He smiled and replied, I'm a member of the Tao Alliance. Although the fallen immortal sect is at the edge of the Tao Alliance, under the leadership of Alliance Master Wen Jie, all the countries are loyal to the Tao Alliance. It's my honor to be able to contribute to the Tao Alliance. Good, it's good that you have such intentions, Ji Yang Zhenren said perfunctorily and looked at old man Jiyu Qiong. Old man Jiyu Qiong studied the jade slip for a much longer time than Ji Yang Zhenren. His expression was more interesting than Ji Yang's. His expression was grave at first, then shock, then amazement, emotion, admiration, and sighs. All kinds of emotions flashed across his face like flowers. The Yi family's patriarch and the others were puzzled. They couldn't help but recite the spiritual root selection method that Xian Xiaozi had just recited. Wonderful! 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 In the end, old man Jiyu Qiong closed his eyes and held the jade slip in his hand. He opened his mouth and exclaimed 3 times. His voice penetrated the space and caused the entire alliance tree to tremble 3 times. Seeing old man Jiyu Qiong open his eyes, Ji Yang Zhenren asked in a low voice, Senior, did you see the secret behind it? Haha, Ji Yang, if you can see it, why can't I? Old man Jiyu Qiong smiled and said, although this spiritual root is illusory and I can't see what it is, I can still sense the shadow of witchcraft. I've studied the incomplete book from the Wuming mountain range in my early years. Although I'm not proficient in it, I can still sense the faint traces. How should we deal with this spiritual root selection method? Ji Yang Zhenren seemed to be asking, but he seemed to have made a decision long ago. Old man Jiyu Qiong replied without hesitation, all rivers flow into the sea, and all rivers flow into one. At this point, can we still be constrained by factions? Ji Yang Zhenren clapped his hands and said, yes, I agree with you, Senior. Then, Ji Yang Zhenren raised his voice and said, yes, Alliance Master. Reward the fallen immortal sect. Immediately, make a copy of this jade slip and distribute it to the various sects, clans, and sects of our Tao Alliance. Regardless of Mo Wen's background, I guarantee that everyone will have a copy. When the cultivators of the Tao Alliance heard this, they were all shocked. They knew very well that the Tao Alliance had passed down countless techniques since its founding, but none of them had ever been so highly valued by the Alliance Lord, nor had there ever been a technique that would require every single sect to acquire one. Also, old man Jiyu Qiong said with a smile, while making a copy of the jade slip, find 10,000 disciples from the factions near the dragon tomb who are waiting to be selected. We'll test this spiritual root selection method on the spot during the Alliance meeting. Okay. I'll pass down the order right away. Daoist Ji Yang replied and whispered a few words to the ground. He raised his hand and a jade slip fell down. There was a flash of light at the top of the tree and a figure flashed by. The jade slip disappeared along with the figure. Clearly, a disciple of the Tao Alliance had left to carry out the order. I hope the selected disciples will be able to cultivate it. Old man Jiyu Qiong said with a smile. However, before he could finish his sentence, he was taken aback. He took out the jade slip again and looked at it. Then, he asked Xian Xiaozi, why isn't there any spiritual root cultivation technique in this jade slip? Alliance Master. Xian Xiaozi hurriedly stood up and replied innocently, I've already said that my disciple of the fallen immortal sect just obtained this cultivation technique from Xingyun Ridge. The sect leader of the Chanhe sect is hesitant to modify this cultivation technique. Hiss. Old man Jiyu Qiong gasped and stood up abruptly. Xian Xiaozi, didn't you just say that your disciple went missing when he returned to the sect? That's right. I'm not too sure about the details. Xian Xiaozi seemed to have understood something as well. He quickly nodded and said, however, they went missing when they were returning to the sect to deliver the other set of spiritual root selection method. Damn it. Ji Yang Zhenren clapped his hands and said, this must be the doing of the Heaven Alliance. The Fengyang Nation is located at the edge of the Tao Alliance, and it rarely interacts with the Heaven Alliance. I don't think the Heaven Alliance would extend its reach that far. However, Xian Xiaozi, there must be a spy from the Heaven Alliance among your missing disciples. But these disciples. Xian Xiaozi wanted to say that these disciples were the trusted subordinates of the fallen immortal sect from all over the Fengyang nation. However, when he thought about it, even perfected Westmoon was a member of the Heaven Alliance. It was not strange that Exiled King or Exiled King's disciples were from the Heaven Alliance. Oh no. Ji Yuqiong old man was even more shocked when he heard Ji Yang's words. He exchanged a look with Ji Yang Zhenren and said in unison, "The Chanhe sect is in danger. Hurry." Ji Yang Zhenren lowered his head to give the order, but before he could say anything, he turned to the branch where Xian Xiaozi was and roared thunderously, "Where are the disciples of the Dao Alliance guarding the Night Wind Valley? I'm here." A disciple wearing armor appeared on a tree branch next to Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's Wenjie Alliance Master. "Vice Alliance Master, what are your orders? Send 10,000 of the most powerful disciples in the Night Wind Valley. Head to the Fengyang Nation's Nebula Ridge as soon as possible to protect the Chanhe sect and invite the sect master of the Chanhe sect, as well as the disciples related to Zhong Xiaohua to the Dao Alliance." Ji Yang Zhenren ordered without hesitation. "Yes, I understand." The Dao Alliance disciple was clearly confused, but he quickly bowed and was about to disappear. Chapter 4886. Remember, it's urgent. Set up the Continental Teleportation Bridge at all cost. If there's any delay, I'll kill all of you. Ji Yang Zhenren had been very humble ever since Elder Ji Yuqiong arrived, but now, he couldn't help but show his decisiveness and hurriedly added. The Dao Alliance disciple's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to reply, but after a moment of hesitation, he immediately hid his thought. After the Dao Alliance disciple left, Ji Yang Zhenren was relieved. He handed the copied jade slip to the Yi family patriarch who was not far away and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, take a look. Is it comparable to your modified cultivation technique?" The Yi family patriarch took the jade slip and said with a smile, "I have just thought about the spiritual root selection technique from the beginning to the end several times. This is a complete cultivation technique without any flaws. It's not comparable to I's crude cultivation technique. Now, I am looking forward to seeing what's so special about fellow Daoist Zhong's modified cultivation technique. This fellow Daoist Zhong's name is very unfamiliar." Fairy Mo Yun was puzzled. He doesn't seem to be a tribulation-passing cultivator of our Dao Alliance, right? There are two possibilities. Wanderer Fu Bo said with a smile, "This Zhong Xiaohua is not a tribulation-passing cultivator. He might be a Mahayana cultivator or a body integration cultivator. We've never heard of him. The other possibility is that this fellow Daoist is an itinerant cultivator who is unknown. There's another possibility." Ji Yang Zhenren's heart skipped a beat and he said in a low voice, "He might be a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance." "Impossible." Yu Hongzi shook his head and said, "I've never seen a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance helping our Dao Alliance so generously, no." Hearing Ji Yang Zhenren mention the Heaven Alliance, Elder Ji Yuqiong, who had just sat down, stood up again and said, "I'm worried. Since a disciple of the fallen immortal sect has gone missing for a long time, I'm still worried. If that fellow Daoist is still in Xingyun Ridge, it's fine. If he's not, how can the Heaven Alliance not see the importance of fellow Daoist Zhong's modified cultivation technique? I'm afraid your disciple won't make it in time. Moreover, if fellow Daoist Zhong is still in Xingyun Ridge, I'm afraid we'll only send a disciple. There will be a problem, fellow Daoist Zhong." "I don't think so, Lord Alliance Master." Yu Hongzi smiled and said, as Wanderer Fu Bo said, "Zhong Xiaohua may not be a cultivator who has transcended the tribulation. Lord Alliance Master, you don't have to make such a big fuss. Furthermore, from the Dragon's Tomb to the Fengyang Kingdom, fellow Daoist Ji Yang had to go through so much trouble just to retrieve a jade slip. Lord Alliance Master had to cross half of the Yi Lin continent. Why don't we wait for the disciples of the Dao Alliance in Nightwind Valley?" Instead of looking at Yu Hongzi, Elder Ji Yuqiong said to Ji Yang Zhenren, "It doesn't matter whether she is a tribulation transcendence cultivator or not. What matters is that Zhong Xiaohua is a reclusive genius, so we can't treat her lightly." Ji Yang Zhenren nodded slightly, indicating that he understood Elder Jiyu Cheung's meaning. He replied, "Since that's the case, Lord Alliance Master, you can go. We'll make preparations here to test the spirit root technique while preparing to welcome fellow Daoist Zhong Xiaohua." Boom! As soon as Ji Yang finished speaking, Elder Jiyu Cheung slapped his forehead, and a fiery red light shot up into the sky like a volcanic eruption. Then, a 90-meter-tall nascent soul wearing spirit armor flew out of the light. As soon as the nascent soul appeared, an overwhelming aura emanated from the nascent soul, enveloping the surrounding space. Light and shadow distorted, and even the alliance tree wrinkled and swayed in this light and shadow. Immediately, the nascent soul made a gesture with both hands, and a strange light silk more dense than a spider web fell into the void. In front of the nascent soul, a few acres of space began to boil, and layers of thin bubbles flashed with black and white halos rushed out. After a moment, the nascent soul put his hands together and pushed toward the space. Shua! The black and white halos twisted and formed a vortex. Then, the nascent soul swung its arms as if it was grinding a mill, and the vortex gradually grew larger and rapidly spread into the depths of the void. What was special was that the vortex grew larger, and rumbling sounds came from the vortex. Countless small snake-like black thunderbolts appeared in the cracks of the vortex, and the entire space began to shake. Good heavens! Lightning flashed on the Yi family ancestor's face, and he couldn't help but whisper, "I haven't seen Elder Jiyu Cheung for 1,000 years, and his strength has reached such a level. I can't compare to him." As soon as the Yi family ancestor finished speaking, a three-colored light suddenly flashed around the nascent soul. This light and shadow came from the nascent soul's four limbs and rapidly gathered between its eyebrows. A star-shaped mark appeared in the blink of an eye. A nascent soul projection? The Yi family ancestor was stunned. He looked at Elder Jiyu Cheung's nascent soul in disbelief and whispered in his heart, "How can a nascent soul have a nascent soul projection? What's going on?" Before the Yi family ancestor could figure it out, Elder Jiyu Cheung's nascent soul swayed and fell into the void vortex, disappearing in a moment. When the black and white thunderbolts gradually disappeared, the space vortex also disappeared. Vagabond Fu Bo blinked his eyes and looked at the crowd. Then, he said to Ji Yang Zhenren, Deputy Alliance Leader, "Forgive me for speaking out of turn. I'm just an itinerant cultivator and I'm ignorant. I seem to have seen the Heavenly Alliance's primordial spirit projection technique. Moreover, I don't understand. From the Dragon Tomb to the Fengyang Kingdom, we have to cross half of the Yilin continent. Even if Senior Jiyu Cheung is proficient in the void escape technique of the nascent soul realm, he can't go there directly, right?" He. Ji Yang's spiritual master laughed and said, "This is Elder Jiyu Cheung's secret technique, and he usually doesn't show it to others. However, since he used it in front of everyone today, it seems that he has no intention of hiding it anymore. Then, I'll explain it to you. What you saw was right. Elder Jiyu Cheung used the nascent soul projection technique, which is rare even among the cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance. However, this nascent soul projection technique is different from that of the Heavenly Alliance. We cultivators of the Tao Alliance don't have powerful nascent souls. After Elder Jiyu Cheung modified it, he can use his nascent soul. Also, our physical bodies can't use the void escape technique, but nascent souls are spiritual bodies and can withstand the pressure of the void. If I'm not wrong, Elder Jiyu Cheung first used the void escape technique to let his nascent soul get as close to the Fengyang Kingdom as possible. When his nascent soul couldn't escape, he used the nascent soul projection technique to project his nascent soul to the Xingyun Ridge. Elder Jiyu Cheung's Dharma spells are too wonderful. We can't compare to him, a cultivator who was in the Tribulation Transcendence realm side. This step involves the nascent soul escape technique and the improved nascent soul projection technique. He has all kinds of wonderful Dharma spells at his fingertips. I can't believe it. Since Elder Jiyu Cheung has gone, the Xingyun Ridge will be fine, the Yi family's patriarch said meaningfully. Deputy Alliance Leader, should we ask Xian Xiaozi to tell us about the Chan He sect? Actually, the Chan He sect should be heavily rewarded. That's right. Perfected Ji Yang nodded and said, "You're right, fellow Daoist Yi. I didn't mention the Chan He sect just now because it's a small sect that isn't listed in the Tao Alliance's list. Even if I told them about it, they wouldn't know. After the alliance meeting, I'll definitely ask my disciples to reward them heavily. Then, perfected Ji Yang looked at Xian Shaozi and said, "Tell us about the Chan He sect." This. Xian Shaozi was at a loss for words. After all, the Chan He sect was too small. It was only a sect led by a nascent soul realm cultivator. There were at least dozens of such sects in the Fengyang kingdom, if not hundreds. How would he know? Left with no choice, Xian Shaozi turned to look at Wen Jie. He was probably asking for help. Wen Jie also wanted to help Xian Shaozi, but he wasn't from the Fengyang kingdom, so it was even more impossible for him to know about the Chan He sect. He could only shrug at Xian Shaozi helplessly. Deputy Alliance Leader. Xian Shaozi thought for a while and smiled apologetically. The Chan He sect is an extremely small sect. Their sect leader seems to be only a nascent soul realm cultivator. The ordinary hall masters of the fallen immortal sect are all spirit-severing disciples. Therefore, I really don't know much about the Chan He sect. Oh, right, the deputy hall master of the fallen immortal sect, Huang Shu, was the one who went to the Nebula Ridge. He was also the one who gave me the jade slip before I entered the alliance meeting. Oh, if that's the case, once the alliance meeting begins, the Night Wind Valley's teleportation formation will be sealed. Without the alliance token, no one will be able to use it. Huang Shu will only be able to leave if he uses an escape technique. Perfected Ji Yang thought for a while and said, "Furthermore, the Night Wind Valley is surrounded by strong winds. Who would be so bored as to barge in?" The disciple stationed at the Night Wind Valley summoned the fallen immortal sect's disciple, Huang Shu, to enter the alliance meeting. Yes, disciple obeys. Another voice came from the tree next to Wen Jie. The figure disappeared in a flash. Everyone was waiting. The Tribulation Transcendence cultivators on the tree crown were copying the spirit root selection technique while discussing the secret technique. Alliance leader Wen Jie smiled at Xian Shaozi and said, "Congratulations, fellow Daoist. Our Chu Pu Immortal Alliance has never been so popular in the Dao Alliance meeting. Today, we are all basking in your glory. We're really in the limelight today. You're too kind. Isn't this all thanks to Alliance leader Wen's leadership?" Xian Shaozi said flatteringly. "Chemph." Li Pan snorted coldly. "This is the glory of the Chan He sect. What does it have to do with the fallen immortal sect? If the fallen immortal sect wasn't a member of the Dao Alliance, how would you be rewarded so generously? Stealing other people's credit to make yourself look good? You're really capable of that. Isn't this the legendary Shameless?" Li Pan's words were like swallowing a disgusting fly in Xian Shaozi's ears. However, Li Pan's words weren't wrong at all. Xian Shaozi's face flushed red. He was speechless again. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, bookmark it, or tip it. Also, I was supposed to rest today. However, since the alliance leader of Basking in the Moonlight 5 is here, I'll continue to update. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for your support. There are no more chapters left. Chapter 4887. Hee hee. Wen Jie smiled and said, "Don't be jealous, fellow Daoist Li. This is fate." Although the Chan He sect met senior Zhong Xiaohua, they didn't know the importance of the spiritual root selection technique. More importantly, although they are in the Dao Alliance, they can't participate in the Alliance conference directly. Therefore, they could only borrow fellow Daoist Xian Shaozi's hand and offer up the spiritual root selection technique. As the saying goes, a fine steed is common, but a talent scout is rare. Isn't this the reason? TSK. Li Pan didn't mock Wen Jie because of his status as the alliance leader of the Immortal Alliance. He only looked at Xian Shaozi with disdain. While everyone was discussing, Wen Jie felt that the branch he was on was trembling. Then, he hurriedly got up and saw that there was a sudden fluctuation at the junction between the branch and the trunk. The fluctuation spread out like ripples, and the outline of a door gradually appeared at the edge of the branch. Whoosh! With a soft sound, Huang Shu's figure appeared from the door. There was a hint of excitement on his slightly panicked face. Just as Daoist Ji Yang had expected, Huang Shu and Yukong returned to the teleportation array. The array was surrounded by the Tao Alliance's disciples and sealed off the area. How could Huang Shu let go of the opportunity to show off in front of Xian Xiaozi? He found a quiet place with Yukong and chatted while waiting for the Alliance conference to end. They waited for a few days. Huang Shu didn't seem to be impatient. Just as the two of them were talking about the interesting things about the Fengyang kingdom, a thunderous voice rang out nearby. Dozens of spirit-severing stage cultivators flew out of the Night Wind Valley in an orderly formation and called out Huang Shu's name. Huang Shu was shocked and had a premonition. He knew that the spiritual root selection technique must have taken effect. Therefore, he quickly flew into the sky and agreed. After the Tao Alliance's disciples verified his identity, they immediately brought Huang Shu back to the Alliance conference, leaving Yukong confused. Of course, just as Huang Shu's figure disappeared, Yukong came to a realization. He stomped his feet and gritted his teeth. Damn it, this guy must be hiding something from me. Unfortunately, even if Yukong knew, what could he do? Since Huang Shu had joined the Alliance conference, his status would definitely be on par with Yukong in the fallen immortal sect. Yukong wouldn't be able to do anything to Huang Shu. Huang Shu naturally understood this as well. Therefore, the moment he stepped into the Alliance, he first looked at the humongous tree in shock. When his gaze landed on Xian Xiaozi, who was sitting cross-legged on a leaf not far away, he immediately wanted to walk over. Unfortunately, it was as if there was an impenetrable wall around Huang Shu. He was unable to move at all. Thus, Huang Shu came to a halt and bowed towards Xian Xiaozi. Greetings, Sect Master. I've come here on the orders of the Alliance leader, Daoist Ji Yang, Daoist GS Daoist Ji. Xian Xiaozi was very satisfied with Huang Shu's attitude. However, with a look of panic, he raised his hand and gestured for Huang Shu to look at the treetop. Huang Shu couldn't tell who Ji Yang was, so he hurriedly bowed and said, "Junior greets Ji Yang." "Get up, Huang Shu." Daoist Ji Yang said calmly. "You have contributed greatly to the Tao Alliance by delivering the spiritual root selection method. After the Alliance conference, I will reward the fallen immortal sect. You will be rewarded as well. Thank you, Daoist Ji Yang." Huang Shu was moved to tears when he heard Daoist Ji Yang's generosity. Daoist Ji Yang continued to ask, however, "How did you know that the Chanhe sect has this spiritual root selection method? How did you get your hands on it? Also, Daoist Zhong Xiaohua, what does she look like? Just wait. Tell me everything you know." Although Huang Shu had a guilty conscience, he did not panic. He knew very well that his dealings with the Flying Shadow sect were nothing compared to his own contributions. Therefore, he didn't hide anything. He told Daoist Ji Yang everything and stood there respectfully. However, after waiting for a few minutes, there was no sound from the tree. It was as though Daoist Ji Yang didn't hear Huang Shu's report. Huang Shu was slightly surprised and looked up at the tree. On the top of the tree, perfected Ji Yang was just like the Yi clan's patriarch and the others. They looked confused and frowned slightly as if they were thinking about something. Even Wanderer Fu Bo and the others looked at each other with their mouths moving. No one knew what they were saying. "Huang Shu, you mean?" After a few seconds, Daoist Ji Yang finally said, "Zhong Xiaohua subdued all the beasts of the Flying Shadow sect with a roar?" "Yes." Huang Shu nodded. "I saw it with my own eyes. Also, you couldn't sense Zhong Xiaohua's cultivation and couldn't see the fluctuation of his magic power when he flew?" "Yes, that's right." Huang Shu answered without hesitation. "Could it be?" The Yi clan's patriarch hesitated. "We made a big fuss over nothing. This spiritual root selection method wasn't created by Zhong Xiaohua. He got it from somewhere else." "Huang Shu, do you know?" Daoist Ji Yang asked loudly. Huang Shu thought for a while and answered, "I don't know. I only got this method from Yu Zhuohong, a disciple of the Chanhe sect. However, Yu Zhuohong said that Senior Zhong taught the disciples of the Chanhe sect while selecting disciples. This method should be ready-made. Oh, also, I heard Yu Zhuohong mention that she once brought some cultivation methods for selecting spiritual roots to the Grand Xie Mountain auction house, and she sold dozens of jade slips in the auction house. How many crystals did he sell for each jade slip?" The Yi clan's patriarch suddenly asked. Huang Shu smiled and said, I didn't ask, but from his tone, it shouldn't be too much. Alas, what a waste. The Yi clan's patriarch sighed. This method is a priceless treasure, but it was sold so cheaply. What a pity. Yes, yes. Huang Shu hurriedly said, I realized the importance of this method, so I hurriedly sent Shijun and the others back to the sect to report to my sect master. However, I didn't expect so many things to happen. There are many things that you don't know. Ji Yang Zhenren smiled and said, as long as the Heaven Alliance doesn't give up on destroying our Taoist alliance, such strange things will happen. We can only be vigilant and treat it seriously. The Heaven Alliance? Huang Shu was stunned and said in shock, how can there be people from the Heaven Alliance in the Fengyang Kingdom? Not only the Fengyang Kingdom, you should say, there are people from the Heaven Alliance in the Fallen Immortal sect. Ji Yang Zhenren said sternly. Then, he looked around and said fiercely, everyone, when you return to the sect after the Alliance conference, you must carefully investigate the background of the disciples in the sect. Search carefully and find out who the people from the Heaven Alliance are. Xian Xiaozi and the other cultivators were shocked. Ji Yang Zhenren's words were easy, but it was abnormally difficult to do. Since the people from the Heaven Alliance wanted to hide in the various sects, they would naturally remove all traces. Moreover, the disciples of the various sects had been in the sect for many years. How could they find any evidence? Yes, we understand. Everyone answered in unison. However, their voices were a little low. Clearly, they all knew that this was an impossible task. Then, the Yi clan's patriarch, Fairy Mo Yun, and a dozen tribulation-passing cultivators asked Huang Shu some questions about Zhong Xiaohua. Only then did the Alliance conference calm down. Everyone was waiting for Old Man Jiyu Qiong. However, Old Man Jiyu Qiong's nascent soul had to cross half of the Yilin continent. In order to ensure the success of the nascent soul projection, Old Man Jiyu Qiong did not leave his nascent soul in his physical body. Therefore, no one knew where Old Man Jiyu Qiong was or what had happened. However, after only an hour, the Alliance conference became lively again. This was because the Taoist Alliance's disciples in the Dragon's Tomb had found 10,000 children to be selected from the Taoist Alliance's sects nearby. Daoist Ji Yang and the others smiled as they looked at the leaf that was several acres large and the 10,000 children sitting on it. Of course, there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. The fact that 10,000 children had been found in such a short time meant that the Taoist Alliance's sects really did not have a practical selection method. They had no choice but to temporarily leave these children in their sects. Let the disciples choose 10 children for each of us. Ji Yang Zhenren looked at the tribulation-passing cultivators on his left and smiled. Let's compare the selection method we used before and the one we modified with this spiritual root selection method. What do you think? Very well. The cultivators all stood up and answered with smiles. Upon hearing Daoist Master Ji Yang's orders, the Dao Alliance disciples guarding the children immediately raised their hands and casually picked a few hundred children out of the 10,000 children and brought them to the edge of the leaf. Ji Yang Zhenren and the others walked to the leaf and stood among the children casually. Then, they began to activate their spells to select the children. Although the spiritual root selection method was simple, Ji Yang Zhenren and the other tribulation-passing cultivators did not dare to be careless. Each of them cast their spells seriously, and it took them 5 minutes to select one child. Ji Yang Zhenren looked around in shock. The Yi family's patriarch, Wanderer Fu Bo, and the others who were closest to Ji Yang Zhenren had the same expression on their faces. Everyone, Ji Yang Zhenren said, I'll announce the results of my selection first. Okay. Everyone nodded with eagerness in their eyes. Chapter 4888. Daoist Ji Yang looked at the 10 children sitting cross-legged in front of him and pointed at them. I used the method before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth mutated to select the 10 children. I was only certain of one of them, and the other 9 were all blurry. When I used the bone-sifting technique, I was able to confirm that 3 out of the 10 children could cultivate, and 1 out of the 10 children could not cultivate. As for the other 6 children, I was not sure about them. The child I was certain of was also one of the 3 children. At this point, Daoist Ji Yang paused for a moment and said excitedly, But I used the spiritual root selection method to confirm that 3 children have earth spiritual roots, 1 child has water spiritual roots, 1 child has fire spiritual roots, and the other 5 children have no spiritual root. Moreover, among the 3 children that I was able to confirm earlier, only one of them had the earth spiritual root. Furthermore, this child was selected by this old man using the bone sifting technique. Hee. Fairy Mo Yun laughed and said, "The result of my selection was the exact opposite of yours. Among the 10 children, I was certain of 5 of them with the ordinary selection method and 6 were blurry. However, with the clear mind technique that I modified, I was certain of 3 and the other 7 were blurry. On the other hand, I was only certain of 1 with the so-called mutated ice spiritual roots and the other 9 had no spiritual root." Haha, Fairy Mo Yun, how can you call it the opposite? My result is the opposite. A tribulation passing cultivator laughed. I used the ordinary selection method to select 5 disciples, but the selection method eliminated these 5 disciples. The other 5 disciples that I couldn't identify had earth spiritual root. Then, Yi Clan's ancestor and the others also reported the results of their selection. Apart from a few cultivators, most of the cultivators used the ordinary and improved selection methods to select disciples, which were different from the selection method. While the cultivators were discussing the advantages and disadvantages of the spiritual root selection method, Daoist Ji Yang said, "Everyone, no matter how good the spiritual root selection method is, after we use it, we can determine which disciple is unsuitable for cultivation, right? This is something that the previous selection method can't compare with. Based on this alone, I feel that the spiritual root selection method is extremely ingenious." That's right, Vice Alliance Leader is right. Everyone was convinced. Furthermore, Fairy Mo Yun said softly, "When I was selecting my disciples, I used a secret technique. This secret technique is not something that ordinary cultivators can use. When I activated the spirit root technique, it seemed to be very easy. Even ordinary disciples can use it." Okay. Ji Yang Zhenren nodded and said, "I've asked some disciples of the Dragon Tomb to study this technique. Now, I'll call them in and have a look." Subsequently, 10 spirit severing stage disciples, 10 nascent soul stage disciples, 10 golden core stage disciples, and 10 foundation establishment stage disciples flew out from the trunk and landed on the huge leaf. At Daoist Ji Yang's command, each of the 40 disciples began to select disciples with spirit roots from the 10 children. In just half a meal's worth of cultivation techniques, 400 children had finished their selection. Ji Yang Zhenren and the others were still worried, so they personally checked again. They were surprised to find that, except for 3 foundation establishment disciples and 1 golden core disciple, the results of the other disciples' selections were exactly the same as theirs. In other words, this spirit root selection technique could be used by low-level cultivators, and the accuracy rate was very high. After the 40 disciples left, Ji Yang Zhenren looked at the selected disciples without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking. At the alliance meeting, none of the cultivators said anything because they knew very well what was going on. Since the disciples were selected, they naturally had to cultivate. However, with the change in heaven and earth spirit chi, what kind of cultivation technique would they cultivate? Would it be the original technique or a modified one? Ji Yang Zhenren was waiting for old man Jiyu Cheung to come back. Everything was ready, and now he only needed one thing. However, to everyone's surprise, old man Jiyu Cheung didn't come back even after several hours. At this moment, a disciple of the Dao Alliance appeared from a trunk to the left of Huang Shu. He bowed and reported, "Vice Alliance Leader, I was ordered to lead 10,000 cultivators to Nebula Ridge through the Continent Teleportation Bridge." Ji Yang Zhenren was obviously anxious. Before the disciple could finish, he scolded, "Speak more seriously. Have you seen Alliance Leader? Where are the disciples of the Chan He faction?" "Yes." The disciple was used to Ji Yang Zhenren's scolding, so he replied concisely, "When I arrived there, Alliance Leader had been killed by nearly 10,000 cultivators of the Heavenly Alliance less than 500 kilometers away from Nebula Ridge. I led my subordinates to capture more than 1,000 disabled disciples, clean up all the corpses, and bring them back to the Dragon Tomb. After that, I followed Alliance Leader to Nebula Ridge and invited Liu Hanhuan, the sect leader of the Chan He faction, and other disciples related to Senior Zhong. What about Alliance Leader? Ji Yang Zhenren asked with a frown. When I returned through the continent teleportation bridge, Alliance Leader didn't say anything, so I don't know. The disciple hurriedly replied. In addition, I also gave Alliance Leader the cultivation technique Jade Slip that Senior Zhong modified for the Chan He faction. Okay, you can leave now. Let Liu Hanhuan and his subordinates in. Ji Yang Zhenren waved his hand and ordered. The disciple bowed and disappeared. After a few seconds, Liu Hanhuan appeared on a leaf with Yu Zhuohong, Gao Cheng, Xiafeng, Yun Tsongyu, Hong Feng, and Zhong Ji. Liu Hanhuan and the others couldn't compare to Huang Shu. As soon as they entered, their faces turned pale and panicked. They looked left and right, and before they could see clearly, they saluted in panic. Junior Liu Hanhuan and the others greet Alliance Master. Wait, don't be nervous. Ji Yang Zhenren said with a smile. You are now the great heroes of the Taoist Alliance. Speaking of which, I'm the one who should be saluting to you. If it weren't for you, how could the Taoist Alliance obtain the spiritual root selection method? If it weren't for the spiritual root selection method, how could the Taoist Alliance select suitable disciples in the future? Hearing Ji Yang Zhenren's words, Liu Hanhuan finally felt relieved. He knew that no matter what happened in the future, he would not have to worry about the Chan He faction being destroyed by other factions. Therefore, Liu Hanhuan hastily bowed again and said, since Junior and Junior's Chan He faction are part of the Taoist Alliance, we should do our best for the Taoist Alliance. What Junior did was what I should do, and I don't deserve Senior's thanks. Moreover, it was Senior Zhong who gave all of this to my Chan He faction. If Senior wants to thank me, you can go and find Senior Zhong. Haha, I'm not surprised by your favor. I don't deserve it. Sect Leader Liu, you're really good. Ji Yang Zhenren smiled and said, Chu Pu Immortal Alliance Leader, how can such a strong cultivator not be a member of the Immortal Alliance? Shocked, Wen Jie hastily stood up and said with fear, it's all Junior's fault. After the Alliance conference, Junior will definitely invite Sect Leader Liu to join my Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. Ji Yang Zhenren nodded slightly and said to Liu Hanhuan, Sect Leader Liu, can you tell me about your encounter with fellow Daoist Zhong Xiaohua? Alliance Leader. Liu Hanhuan hastily called out, you're already praising me by calling me Hanhuan. Please don't call me Sect Leader Liu anymore. Haha, okay. Hanhuan, tell me what happened in the past month slowly. Ji Yang Zhenren smiled. Liu Hanhuan cleared his throat and was about to speak. Rumble. A series of thunderclaps came from the distance. When the thunderclaps got closer, the void began to show folds and black and white lines collapsed into the void. Woo! A strange whistling sound suddenly rang out and the collapsing void shrank rapidly. Then, with a flash of red light, Old Man Jiyu Cheong's nascent soul flew out of the collapsing void like a stream of light. An aura as vast as before surged in all directions like a tide. Whoosh! As soon as the nascent soul appeared, Old Man Jiyu Cheong's body glowed with a dazzling brilliance and the nascent soul flew into it faster than a swallow returning to its nest. When Old Man Jiyu Cheong's nascent soul fused with his body, the lightning flashed and chased after him. It flickered for a moment before disappearing along with his aura. Liu Hanhuan waited tactfully while Ji Yang Zhenren stared at Old Man Jiyu Cheong without blinking. Old Man Jiyu Cheong opened his eyes and nodded at him before closing his eyes to meditate. Ji Yang Zhenren then looked up at Liu Hanhuan and said, Hanhuan, Alliance Leader is back. You can speak now. Yes. Liu Hanhuan agreed and told Ji Yang Zhenren about how Nuo Yeqing discovered the Heavenly Cycle Demon Subduing Star Formation, how Liu Qingyu failed to break it, how he invited Hong Feng, Yu Hua, and Zhong Ji to go with him, and how he discovered Xiao Hua. Finally, Liu Hanhuan said, in order to thank Senior Zhong, I agreed to let Nuo Yeqing's master, Liu Qingyu, and Yu Hua come with me. Of course, Liu Qingyu and Yu Hua seemed to have told Senior Zhong about this before, but Senior Zhong didn't agree at that time. After that, Liu Qingyu found Gao Cheng and asked me to mention it in front of Senior Zhong. I thought that it was a good thing to help them, so I agreed. Who knew that Senior Zhong didn't refuse? So, Senior Zhong left Chan He sect with the three of them 10 days before Alliance Master came to Nebula Ridge. Then, Hanhuan, Do you know where fellow Daoist Zhong went? Ji Yang Zhenren thought for a moment and asked with a trace of regret and a trace of hope in his eyes. Chapter 4889. Liu Hanhuan was a little hesitant. When he was reporting, he had only described Xiao Hua's deeds in the Chan He sect in detail. In fact, he hadn't revealed anything about Xiao Hua. Now that he heard Ji Yang's question, he said, Alliance Master, I don't know where Senior Zhong went. However, when Senior Zhong was in Xingyun Ridge, he asked me about the location of the Wuming mountain range. Moreover, after Elder Yu Zhuohong returned from the Grand Pavilion mountain auction, he gave Senior Zhong a jade slip that recorded the transmission route from the Fengyang Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance. Master Ji Yang raised his eyebrows and asked faintly, Hanhuan, let's not talk about fellow Zhong's whereabouts for now. Let me ask you, what do you think of the spiritual route selection method? Seeing that Master Ji Yang didn't ask about Xiao Hua's whereabouts, Liu Hanhuan was relieved and said respectfully, My cultivation is shallow, so I don't dare to say too much about the subtleties of the cultivation method. However, as the sect master, I think that the spiritual root selection method can completely replace the spiritual root selection method before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth changed. Moreover, the spiritual root selection method seems to be more reliable than the previous method of determining physique and bone structure. The disciple that my Chan He sect chose was originally a backup plan to deal with the Flying Shadow sect's encirclement. However, the Flying Shadow sect was destroyed by Senior Zhong, so I ordered the Yulon Palace to teach these disciples the most basic chi refining method. As far as I know, 99% of the selected disciples can easily draw chi into their bodies, which is more than before the spiritual chi of heaven and earth change. However, because of my hesitation, Senior Zhong just gave me his modified cultivation method, so I didn't let the disciples teach these cultivation methods to the new disciple. Master Ji Yang looked at Elder Jiyu Qiong, who was meditating with his eyes closed. He didn't know if Elder Jiyu Qiong was comprehending the modified cultivation method or adjusting his breath. He then asked Liu Hanhuan, Hanhuan, have you seen these modified cultivation methods? What do you think of these cultivation methods? This. When Liu Hanhuan heard that, a bitter smile appeared on his face. He said embarrassedly, reporting to Lord Alliance Leader, My Chan He sect has not been passed down for a long time, and I have little talent and knowledge. Although these cultivation techniques are modified according to my Chan He sect's cultivation techniques, after I read them, although I can understand what has been changed, I still know what it is but not what it is. Furthermore, I haven't had the time to let my disciples practice these techniques. Hehe, it's really hard for you to ask all these questions. Never mind. Hanhuan, your Chan He school has made a great contribution. After the conference, a disciple will give you my token. If anything happens to your Chan He school in the future, you can directly report to me, Reverend Ji Yang said with a smile. Liu Hanhuan was overjoyed and bowed to express his gratitude. Ji Yang Zhenren looks at the disciple behind Ji Yang Zhenren and asks with a pleasant expression, which one is Hong Feng and which one is Zhongji? Hong Feng and Zhongji hurriedly bowed again and said, Junior greets Lord Alliance Leader. Tell me in detail how you met fellow Zhong. Ji Yang Zhenren doesn't want to let go of any details and asks again. Hong Feng and Zhongji didn't dare to be negligent. They recounted their encounter with Xiao Hua in the Xie mountain range. Zhongji even looked at Hong Feng, then at Liu Hanhuan, and said with a smile, Good, Lord Alliance Chief. This junior feels that Senior Zhong is a little strain. Oh, what's strange? Ji Yang Zhenren asks with interest. Zhongji hurriedly says, First, if Senior Zhong has been in seclusion for hundreds of years and has just come out, why is he naked? Even if his clothes are rotten, he must have prepared something in his universal bracelet. Junior didn't see Senior Zhong's storage bracelet. You're right. What's the second thing? Ji Yang Zhenren says with a smile. Secondly, I feel that Senior Zhong, if his cultivation base isn't as profound as ours, then he must have lost all of his magical power and is currently recovering. As he spoke, Zhongji stole a glance at Liu Hanhuan. Sure enough, a trace of anger appears on Liu Hanhuan's face, but it disappears in a flash. At the same time, Hong Feng glares at Zhongji. Ha ha. Ji Yang Zhenren waves his hand and says, Zhongji, you think too much. Junior doesn't think too much. Zhongji still says, if he still has his spiritual power, how could he only use his whistling to fight the enemy? Lord Alliance Leader. Jiao Cheng seems to think of something and hurriedly says, Junior has something important to report. Ji Yang Zhenren seems to have other plans and doesn't want Zhongji to say that Xiao Hua has lost all his spiritual power. Now that Jiao Cheng speaks, he immediately points at him and asks, what's your name? What's so important? Junior is Jiao Cheng of the Chan He Sec. Jiao Cheng hurriedly replies, although I haven't met Senior Zhong much, I know that. Senior Zhong is definitely a senior expert, not a weak one like Zhongji said. Oh. Ji Yang Zhenren laughs and asks, Jiao Cheng, why do you say that? Senior. Jiao Cheng replied, when Liu Qingyu begged me to put in a good word for you in front of the sect leader, he inadvertently revealed that Senior Zhong's Dharma power was boundless, and his vision was even more powerful. When Senior Zhong chatted with the Heavenly Alliance, he told them the reason for the change of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and the reason for the aging of cultivators. What? Ji Yang Zhenren is shocked and asks incredulously, Did he say what the reason is? Yes. Jiao Cheng is overjoyed and hurriedly says, it seems to be about the physical body and bloodline. Bloodline? Bloodline. Ji Yang Zhenren's eyes lit up as if he had understood something. He nodded and said, Jiao Cheng, you're right. Is there anything else? Jiao Cheng certainly wouldn't let go of this opportunity and told him what he knew. When Jiao Cheng finished, Yu Zhuohong hurriedly says, Lord Alliance Leader, I also have something to report. At this moment, old man Jiu Qiong opened his eyes and said, don't worry, yes. Yu Zhuohong didn't dare to say more. He just stood there. Lord Alliance Leader. Ji Yang Zhenren asked worriedly, how is it? Alas, it's okay. Old man Jiu Qiong sighed and got up. If it was before, it would be nothing. Even now, it's just consuming some of my lifespan. Then, Lord Alliance Leader is. Ji Yang Zhenren asked tentatively, comprehending those modified cultivation techniques. Yes. Old man Jiu Qiong nodded and opened his mouth again. Woo! A fiery red light spurts out, and several jade slips fell into the air. Old man Jiu Qiong pointed at the jade slips and said, Ji Yang, these are the spiritual root cultivation techniques that fellow Daoist Zhong created for the disciples of the Chan He Sec. I've taken a look at them and found that they are very complete. In addition to the 5-element spiritual roots, there are also several other mutated spiritual root. These cultivation techniques not only involve qi refinement but also foundation establishment. The cultivation techniques of the disciples of the Chan He sect are very common in the Tao Alliance, and the disciples of other sects can also cultivate these cultivation technique. Therefore, make copies of these cultivation techniques and the spiritual root selection technique. After the Alliance meeting, give them to every sect in the Tao Alliance and ask them to cultivate them. Ji Yang Zhenren suppressed his surprise and took the jade slips. After making a copy, he ordered the disciples standing outside the Alliance meeting to make copies and distribute them. The Yi clan's patriarch bit his lip. After Ji Yang Zhenren gave the order, he said in a low voice, Fellow Daoist Ji Yang, let me take a look first. However, before the Yi clan's patriarch could finish his sentence, woo-woo sounds suddenly came from all over the tree of the Alliance. Then, the sound of wind instruments came from the void. A wave of heaven and earth's will inexplicably enveloped the entire space. This. Not only was the Yi clan's patriarch dumbfounded, but even old man Jiu Qiong and Ji Yang Zhenren were baffled. No one could move, think, or release their spiritual force. All they could see was the roots, trunk, branches, and leaves of the Alliance tree emitting 9 colored lights that fluttered in the void like fireflies. As the wind instruments became clearer, the 9 colored lights gradually gathered together to form a huge and majestic human figure. Old man Jiu Qiong could not help but exclaim in his heart, Tao. Tao Master. Of course, the moment old man Jiu Qiong recognized the human figure, a gentle voice rang in everyone's ears, kindness. Tao Master disappeared as soon as the word kindness appeared, and the Alliance meeting returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Old man Jiu Qiong and the others were still baffled. Ji Yang Zhenren looked down at his hands and asked in confusion, Senior Jiu Qiong, what happened just now? Nothing happened. Tao Master's departure seemed to have erased the previous abnormality. Jiyu Cheong asked in confusion, nothing happened. Didn't the Yi clan's patriarch ask you for a cultivation technique? Oh. Ji Yang Zhenren waved his hand with a smile and handed one of the jade slips to the Yi clan's patriarch. Fellow Daoist, why are you in such a hurry? Everyone will get a copy after the alliance meeting. Haha, I can't wait to see what's so great about this cultivation technique that even senior Jiyu Cheong admires. The Yi clan's patriarch said with a smile as he took the jade slip and read it carefully with his spiritual force. Old man Jiyu Cheong looked around and said, Ji Yang, leave the little girl from the Chan He sect here. The 81 disciples of the Immortal Alliance will leave the Alliance meeting for now. Set up a transmission line outside the Alliance meeting and pass the spiritual root selection and spiritual root cultivation techniques to the members of the Alliance meeting from the Dragon's Tomb so that they can comprehend them immediately. Chapter 4890. Yes. Ji Yang nodded and gave the order. Soon, all the branches of the Alliance tree were gone, leaving only a leaf floating on the bare trunk where Yu Zhuohong was. Yu Zhuohong. Jiyu Cheong asked, what do you want to say? I gave Senior Zhong a jade slip that day. Yu Zhuohong bit his lips and said, it recorded the teleportation array from the Fengyang Kingdom to the Heaven Alliance. I have another one in my storage ring. Okay. Jiyu Cheong nodded and said, we all know about this, so you don't have to tell anyone else. This is very important, so give me the jade slip. Oh, what do you want as a reward? I want to join a famous sect to cultivate. Yu Zhuohong answered without hesitation. Obviously, he already had a plan in mind. Okay. Ji Yang had a bad temper, but he was a resolute person. He replied immediately, as you wish. Where are the disciples of the Chongxi faction? Disciple is. A low voice came from the tree trunk. Pass my order. Yu Zhuohong is to leave the Chan He faction and join the Chongxi faction. Ji Yang ordered, I'll leave this matter to you. Find a suitable master for Yu Zhuohong. Yes, master. The disciple agreed and left in a flash of light. Thank you, sect master. Yu Zhuohong cried tears of joy and kowtowed to express his gratitude. He, get up. Ji Yang said with a smile, I'm not the Chongxi faction master, someone else is the sect master. However, the sect master won't disobey my order. You should withdraw from the alliance now. Oh, remember, carve Zhong Xiaohua's appearance into a jade slip, then give the jade slip to the alliance's disciples. Say that it's this old man's order, and have them immediately send it to Jing Longling. Then, say goodbye to the Chan He faction master and go to the Chongxi faction. Yes, I understand. Yu Zhuohong didn't dare to delay and left the alliance conference immediately. Seeing that the space had cleared up, Ji Yang Zhenren looked to his left and raised his finger. Whoosh! Dark green light rose up layer by layer, covering the treetop. Senior Jiyu Cheong, did you find anything? Ji Yang asked after he had used his spiritual force to check it out. Old man Jiyu Cheong did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the Yi clan patriarch solemnly and asked, Yi Zhen, what do you think of this qi refinement technique? Yi Zhen withdrew his divine sense from the jade slip and handed it to the tribulation transcending cultivator next to him. Without any hesitation, he said, when I first looked at the modification of the cultivation method, I felt that it was ordinary, but the deeper I looked, the more frightened I became. The modification of the cultivation method is like playing Go. The previous few moves were very simple, and I couldn't see any clues. Step by step, all the chess pieces were placed down, and the whole game was over. Only then did I realize that the whole game was flawless. Every move before had great meaning, and every move was a perfect combination with the chess pieces before and after. Not bad. Old man Jiyu Cheong nodded and said, when I came back, I started to comprehend this cultivation method. Just like what the elder ancestor of the Yi clan said, I didn't pay too much attention to it at the beginning. However, when I returned to the Alliance conference and calmed down to carefully comprehend it, I realized that, although this cultivation method looks simple, it actually opens up a new path and is a perfect match for the spirit root selection technique. Hiss! Ji Yang gasped when he heard Old Man Jiyu Cheong and Old Man Jiyu Cheong's words. He had never seen old man Jiyu Cheung praise someone like that before, and he had never seen the arrogant Yi clan patriarch praise someone like that. What a pity. Old man Jiyu Cheung sighed and changed his tone. I thought that Zhong Xiaohua was an itinerant cultivator of the Tao Alliance, but in fact, he might be a high-level cultivator of the Heaven Alliance. Ah, the Heaven Alliance. Ji Yang asked in surprise, Alliance Master, what's going on? Ji Yang, didn't you say that during the Alliance conference? The Heaven Alliance suddenly sent a lot of people to infiltrate our Tao Alliance in the past 10 years. You've been wondering why they did that, but I'll tell you that it's most likely because of Zhong Xiaohua. Old man Jiyu Cheung explained with a trace of regret on his face, after I killed the cultivators of the Heaven Alliance, I went to the Western Wild Mountain Range, where Zhong Xiaohua first appeared. Guess what I found there? It was rare for old man Jiyu Cheung to keep them in suspense. Unfortunately, everyone was busy reading the Jade Slip, and immortal Ji Yang was eager to know the truth, so he didn't answer. Only Yi Zhen pondered for a while and asked, Senior, did you find the continent teleportation bridge? What shocked me more than the continental teleportation bridge? Old man Jiyu Cheung narrowed his eyes and said, it's the aura of the realm passage. Hiss. Old man Jiyu Cheung's words startled the cultivators who were copying the Jade Slips and searching for the cultivation method. They looked up at old man Jiyu Cheung in surprise. Senior, didn't you say that you were looking for the realm passage? The Yi family patriarch's breathing quickened as he hurriedly asked, did you find it in the Western Wild Mountain Range? No. Old man Jiyu Cheung shook his head and said, I came back late because I used my primordial spirit projection to look for traces of the realm passage in the Western Wild Mountain Range. However, the space within 5,000 kilometers of the Western Wild Mountain Range was closed. Except for some chaotic realm laws, there was no trace of the passage. In other words, Zhong Xiaohua didn't come out of seclusion but came back from another realm. She came to the Western Wild Mountain Range of our Tao Alliance by accident and didn't return to the territory of the Heaven Alliance. Ji Yang asked. Of course. Old man Jiyu Cheung said with a smile, didn't you hear what Zhong Zhitseng said? When Zhong Xiaohua appeared, she was naked, so her clothes must have been torn by the realm passage. Needless to say, her storage ring might have been destroyed during the realm passage. Most importantly, Zhong Xiaohua mentioned the Defeat You Immortal Alliance. Do you remember it? Isn't the Defeat You Immortal Alliance one of the 72 immortal alliances of the Heaven Alliance? Is it near the Wuming Mountain Range on the southeast edge of the Yilin continent? Yes, that's right. Ji Yang spiritual master nodded. Later, when Zhong Xiaohua found out this was the Tao Alliance, not the Heaven Alliance, she immediately changed her words and said she was going to the Wuming Mountain Range. If she went to the Wuming Mountain Range from the Tao Alliance, she would have to go to the Heaven Alliance, right? The patriarch of the Yi family pondered for a moment and nodded. Yes, didn't Jiao Cheng say that? When Zhong Xiaohua talked about the reason for the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the passing of one's lifespan, he mentioned the body and bloodline. As far as I know, some immortal alliances in the Heavenly Alliance near the Wuming Mountain Range are affected by the witchcraft of the Wuming Mountain Range. The Heavenly Alliance's Taoist techniques contain the power of bloodline. I didn't realize it before, but now that you mentioned it, I realized that there are traces of witchcraft in the spiritual root selection method. In this modified cultivation method, 30% of the bloodline technique, 20% of the physical body tempering technique, and 50% of the real Taoist skill. This is the characteristic of the Heaven Alliance's Taoist skill. Yi Zhen, you underestimated Zhong Xiaohua. Elder Jiyu Cheung said meaningfully, of the 50% Taoist skill, 30% is the essence spirit cultivation technique of the Heaven Alliance, and 40% is the real Taoist skill. Wow! Even Ji Yang spiritual master and the others were shocked. Ji Yang spiritual master even cried out, Alliance Master, how could this Qi refinement cultivation technique contain so many mysteries? What do you think? Elder Jiyu Cheung asked, if this Qi refinement cultivation technique wasn't so wonderful, how could I let all the disciples of the Tao Alliance cultivate it? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Ji Yang spiritual master shook his head in disbelief, clearly unable to understand. Ordinary cultivators might not understand the source of the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but how could we not know? Elder Jiu Cheong continued, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth must have rushed into the Yilan continent and caused chaos. Of course, finding a space channel to go to another world is the solution. Since the Tao Alliance thought of it, the Heaven Alliance naturally thought of it as well. Zhong Xiaohua should be the cultivator that the Heaven Alliance sent to another world to find a passage. Fairy Mo Yun came to a realization. She looked at the jade slip in her hand and said loudly, Alliance Master, since he's a cultivator of the Heaven Alliance, why did he leave the spiritual root selection method and the spiritual root cultivation technique to our Tao Alliance's Chan He sect? It's simple. If you met an ordinary sect in the Heaven Alliance, would you be stingy with some cultivation techniques? Elder Jiu Cheong asked with a smile. Of course I wouldn't be stingy with ordinary cultivation techniques, Fairy Mo Yun replied, but this cultivation technique is obviously different. If you've already found the passageway to other realms, the Heavenly Alliance will soon eliminate the influence of the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in other ways. Will you still care about these cultivation methods under the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? Elder Jiu Cheong replied, moreover, you have foundation establishment, gold core, and even nascent soul cultivation techniques. No. Fairy Mo Yun shook her head slightly. So, Elder Jiu Cheong said firmly, I might have doubted it before, but from this cultivation technique, I'm sure that Zhong Xiaohua must have found the passage to another world. Ji Yang Zhenren immediately said, the 10,000 disciples of the Heaven Alliance who went to the Chan He sect didn't come for the Chan He sect, but for the Westfield mountain rain. Haha, you're right. Elder Jiu Cheong clapped his hands and said, I didn't realize it before I arrived at the Westfield mountain range. Unfortunately, it was too late. I'll leave this matter to you. See if you can find out anything from the remaining disciples of the Heaven Alliance. Chapter 4891. Why do you care about those low-level disciples? The patriarch of the Yi family said with a smile, didn't Zhongji say that? Zhong Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, which is exactly the result of passing through the realm channel. Zhong Xiaohua is heading to the Heavenly Alliance according to the teleportation route given by Yu Zhuohong of the Chan He sect. He doesn't know that his identity and whereabouts have been exposed. We just need to take the teleportation route and rush to the teleportation array to intercept Zhong Xiaohua. Ji Yang spiritual master said with a smile, that's why I asked the other disciples of the Tao Alliance to leave the alliance meeting. Then, Ji Yang spiritual master raised his voice and asked, disciples of the Tao Alliance, have you sent any jade slips from Nightwind Valley? Vice Alliance leader, the teleportation route on the continent has been set up. Please wait for 15 minutes. A respectful voice came from the tree trunk. Okay. Ji Yang spiritual master replied and looked around. Although Zhong Xiaohua has lost all his spiritual power, he is at least an early-stage crossing tribulation cultivator, so we can't neglect him. I'm going to issue an Earth-level alliance token and secretly order the sects guarding the teleportation arrays to pay close attention to the teleportation arrays recorded in the jade slips and even the teleportation arrays around them. If they find any trace of Zhong Xiaohua, they must report it to the Tao Alliance immediately. We're going to work in pairs and take charge of different areas. When the message is sent out, the fellow Taoists on the left should head there immediately. Okay. All the crossing tribulation cultivators agreed. Before long, the disciples of the Tao Alliance delivered the jade slips. Ji Yang spiritual master made dozens of copies and distributed the teleportation routes to the disciples. Then, he assigned the disciples according to the routes. In the end, Daoist Ji Yang looked at the crowd and solemnly said, this matter is very important. If we capture Zhong Xiaohua, our Tao Alliance will be able to obtain information about the realm passageway. At the very least, we'll be able to obtain more cultivation techniques for our disciples. Therefore, this humble Daoist begs all of you, you must keep Zhong Xiaohua in the Tao Alliance. What if we can't? A crossing tribulation cultivator couldn't help but ask. I don't think so. Old man Jiu Cheong said with a smile, Zhong Xiaohua has just passed through the realm channel, and he has lost all his spiritual power. How can he be your match? If you find it, you will definitely be able to capture it. This junior is asking what if. That cultivator seemed to want to get to the bottom of the matter. Which crossing tribulation cultivator doesn't have a secret technique to escape? At the critical moment, how should this junior deal with it? Kill. Daoist Ji Yang said without hesitation, if the Tao Alliance can't get it, then neither can the Heaven Alliance. Old man Jiyu Cheong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Ji Yang. He shook his head slightly as if he was looking at his willful nephew and said with a smile, Ji Yang, you should wait until you become the leader of the Tao Alliance. You have to understand that although Zhong Xiaohua is a cultivator of the Heavenly Alliance, she is still a member of the Tao sect. He carries the heavy responsibility of the Heaven Alliance and knows the secrets of the realm passageway. Not only is he extremely important to the Heaven Alliance, he's also extremely important to our Tao Alliance. Even if we can't capture him, we can't kill him. If the Heaven Alliance was able to escape using the realm passageway, how could the Tao Alliance, which has so many spies in the Heaven Alliance, not have received the news? Our Tao Alliance will be able to benefit from this as well. Everyone, listen to my orders as the leader. Yes. It was rare for the cultivators to see old man Jiyu Cheong so solemn, so they hurriedly bowed and said, according to our previous discussion, if you see Zhong Xiaohua, immediately capture her. If she desperately tries to escape, you can only chase after her. Don't kill her. Yes. The cultivators replied in unison. After old man Jiyu Cheong gave his orders, Daoist Ji Yang waved his hand and removed the restriction. Then, he ordered the 81 cultivators of the Immortal Alliance to come in and announce the end of the Alliance Conference. After the end of the Alliance Conference, the 81 tree branches turned into streams of light and escaped into the void. Daoist Ji Yang raised his hand and took out a jade rui. Then, he activated his magic power and gently tapped it on the tree trunk. Boom, boom, boom. Loud rumbling sounds resounded. The space around the treetop collapsed. The entire treetop rotated and shrank into the trunk. The entire trunk shook violently as it slowly fell into the space below. The tree trunk broke free from the space and turned into a huge jade pillar. It really did fall into a huge hall. As soon as the jade pillar fell into the hall, it emitted colorful lights and transformed into 365 jade pillars that were more than 30 meters tall. After a while, the lights dimmed and the jade pillars stopped in the center of the hall. Then, old man Jiyu Cheong, Daoist Ji Yang, and the others floated down from their respective jade pillars. After coming out of the hall, the cultivators cupped their hands and bade farewell. Naturally, the disciples of the Tao Alliance came to see them off. After most of the cultivators left, Daoist Ji Yang thought for a while and said, Ye family patriarch, Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, Fairy Mo Yun, follow me and Senior Jiyu Cheong to guard the last few teleportation arrays of the Tao Alliance. If there are no accidents, the Heaven Alliance will definitely send people to the sacrificial abyss and even break into the territory of the Tao Alliance to welcome Zhong Xiaohua. In order to be absolutely safe, let's discuss it again. Yi family patriarch was stunned and looked at Fu Bo. They exchanged a look and said with a smile, in that case, we'll follow Daoist Ji Yang's arrangement. This way please. Daoist Ji Yang nodded slightly and raised his hand. Then, he led them through several palaces and into a very quiet hall. There were no special decorations in this hall except for some jade chairs and several jade pillars with coiling dragons, which looked very grand. Daoist Ji Yang and Daoist Ji Yang sat down and sat in front of Daoist Ji Yang. Daoist Ji Yang and the others walked to the front of the jade chairs, and Elder Jiyu Cheong sat down. Daoist Ji Yang and the others sat down according to the host and the guests. After they sat down, a disciple served them spiritual fruits and spiritual tea. Fairy Mo Yun took a sip of the spiritual tea and looked at Daoist Ji Yang with a smile, saying, Daoist Ji Yang, Zhong Xiaohua is now rushing to the Heaven Alliance through the teleportation array. The other Taoists have been ordered to chase after her. Although our mission is behind, this place is very far from the sacrificial abyss. I'm afraid we can't delay, right? Hee hee. Yu Hongzi smiled and put the spirit fruit in his mouth. After taking a bite, he said, Fellow Daoist Jian, you didn't ask us to stay because of Zhong Xiaohua, right? Daoist Ji Yang glanced at them with a smile and said nothing. Finally, he looked at Elder Jiu Cheung and said, Senior Jiu Cheung, you just used the nascent soul projection technique. Did you lose a lot of your lifespan? Elder Jiu Cheung nodded and replied, yes. I didn't expect that using the nascent soul projection technique would consume so much of my lifespan. Alas. If that's the case. The Yi family's patriarch hurriedly advised, Senior Jiu Cheung, please don't do anything in the future. We're here for you. You'll also consume your lifespan if you do anything. Elder Jiu Cheung shook his head and looked at the palace gate in front of him. He sighed and said, the change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is too terrifying. Zhong Xiaohua is too important. If the Tao Alliance really goes to other realms in the future, today's alliance meeting will be a milestone that will be engraved in the annals of history. Daoist Ji Yang smiled and said, everything about Zhong Xiaohua is still just a guess. We can't relax until we capture her and get concrete information about the realm's passageways. However, I have asked you to stay because I have something to discuss with you about making up for your lifespan. Oh, making up for my lifespan? Is there such a good thing? Elder Jiu Cheung said in surprise, why do I feel like a piece of meat pie has fallen from the sky? Senior, I asked you to attend the alliance meeting because it's very important, and we need you to be the abbot. On the other hand, I want to ask you, the number one expert of the Tao Alliance, to fight against the number one expert of the Heaven Alliance. Daoist Ji Yang replied. Elder Jiu Cheung frowned and asked curiously, could it be that Long Shenzi is also thinking about making a move? Daoist Ji Yang nodded and looked away from Elder Jiu Cheung to the Yi family's patriarch. Then, he glanced at Wanderer Fu Bo, Yu Hongzi, and Fairy Mo Yun before he said, that's right. I received a very reliable piece of news. Not only will Long Shenzi make a move, but Kong Qiong, Yang Xia, Sage Jin, and Earth Spirit's Holy Mother will also make a move. That's why I asked you to stay. It'll be best if we can stop Zhong Xiaohua at the teleportation array. If we can't, it's fine. Whether we can stop her or not, we must cross the heaven sacrificial abyss and head to that place. The Tao Alliance, one of the two major forces of the Yilin continent, regarded Xiaohua as an enemy of the Heaven Alliance and issued an Earth Alliance token to stop him at the teleportation array. However, the Tao Alliance's Alliance Master, Old Man Jiu Cheung, Vice Alliance Master Ji Yang, and even the 81 Alliance Masters of the Tao Alliance seemed to have made an extremely childish mistake. They had thought that Xiaohua would lead the three Chan He sect disciples to the first teleportation formation marked on Zhuohong's jade slip. However, they neglected the fact that Xiaohua didn't have any crystals. Even if he wanted to enter the teleportation array, he couldn't. They didn't do it on purpose. In their eyes, crystals weren't a problem at all. However, crystals were still a very serious problem in the eyes of Xiaohua, a great saint of the human race. Xiaohua had already arrived at the Xiehong Mountain Auction Hall. Faced with a dazzling array of items, Xiaohua had no other choice but to covet them. The Xiehong Mountain Auction Hall was the closest auction hall to the Chan He sect. Xiaohua thought that it was similar to the small auction hall he had seen in the Dawn Rain continent in his early years. However, when Yu Hua steered the flying boat and led him to the auction hall between the two mountains, he was a little dumbfounded when he saw the real auction hall. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. In addition, I was supposed to rest today, but because of the Alliance Master of Basking in the Moonlight 5, I'll continue to update. Thank you for your support. There are no more chapters after 10 p.m. I'm done for today. Let's wait for tomorrow. Chapter 4892. It was a valley that was at least 100 miles long and several miles wide. The valley was not straight but curved like a huge earthworm. In addition to some tent-like things on the ground, there were all kinds of buildings on the mountain walls. These buildings were all built on protruding rocks. They looked like birds' nests, beehives, flowers, tree trunks, and there were even many caves that emitted all kinds of lights. Damn it, this is the Xiehong Mountain Auction House. Xiaohua stood on the flying boat and looked at many Qi refinement and foundation establishment cultivators flying around in a hurry. He couldn't help but sigh. Looks like it's even bigger than the auction house in Jingbua City. However, after a moment, Xiaohua laughed again. Nonsense. Although the country of Shi's Imperial Thunder sect isn't the most famous of the three great sects, it's still ranked behind them and is considered one of the most powerful sect. The head of the Imperial Thunder sect is only at the late nascent soul stage. This Chanhe sect in front of us, in the Fengyang country, not even a fart. Its head is at the nascent soul stage. The strength of the Daoist sects in the Dawn Rain continent is much weaker than the Yilin continent. In the past, when others talked to me about the Defeat You Immortal Alliance, I only thought that the Defeat You Immortal Alliance was the entire Yilin continent. Now, it seems like the Defeat You Immortal Alliance is similar to the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. It's just that the Heaven Alliance is close to the millions of Meng Mountains, so the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent know about it. The cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't know that above this so-called Defeat You Immortal Alliance, there are two colossi, the Tao Alliance and the Heaven Alliance. I still don't know how big these two alliances are, but I think it's something that the cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent don't dare to imagine. If that's the case, it's normal for the Xiehong Mountain auction house to be bigger than the auction house in Jinghua City. While Xiao Hua was thinking, Yu Hua had already stopped the flying boat in a valley and explained in a low voice, "Senior, the auction house doesn't allow flying boats to fly in directly. We'll have to keep the flying boat here and fly in directly." "Oh, which sect manages this Xiehong Mountain auction?" Xiao Hua asked casually as he disembarked from the flying boat. "Senior," Liu Qingyu said with a smile, "small sects don't have the power to manage such an auction, and large sects don't care about it. Only some rogue cultivators are interested in it. This Xiehong Mountain auction house is controlled by a rogue cultivator called Yuhong Mountain Man." "Loose cultivator?" Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback, then he smiled again. "Loose cultivators are also so powerful." "Of course." Yu Hua pursed her lips and said with a smile, "This senior named Yuhong is now a cultivator in the middle stage of the spirit severing stage. He is even more powerful than my sect leader. According to Elder Yuan, this senior is very good at scheming, and has a very good relationship with the nearby immortal cultivation sects and clans. Therefore, everyone is willing to come to this Xiehong Mountain auction house to trade." "Clans?" Xiao Hua nodded. He thought for a moment and said, "In your Chanhe sect's ancient records, there seems to be an immortal cultivation clan with the surname Huang. It is a relatively famous clan in Fengyang country. Is there any famous clan near this Xiehong Mountain?" "Huang clan?" Yu Hua's face was slightly red. She looked at Liu Qingyu and said, "Does junior brother Liu know?" Liu Qingyu shrugged and shook his head. "Don't ask me, I also don't know." "Golden core cultivators." Xiao Hua looked at the two golden core cultivators and unconsciously felt a burst of pain. If they were placed in Xiaoyu continent, they could be considered as people who could call the wind and summon the rain. But in Yilin continent, they were just like him who was only in the Qi refinement realm back then. Their eyes were covered in darkness and they actually didn't know anything. "Forget it." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "You all only know about Chu Pu Immortal Alliance and Tao Alliance. You don't know anything else. Just treat it as if this old man didn't ask anything." "Hehe, it's good that senior knows." Nuo Yeching said with a smile, "If senior wants to know about that Immortal Alliance or whatever, you can just go to the auction house and look for it." Xiao Hua followed Liu Qingyu into the valley and was welcomed by a huge memorial arch. This memorial arch looked a bit strange. It wasn't the usual square, but the kind of irregular pentagon. Two light yellow and light green pillars were inserted into the ground at an angle. Some strange patterns were engraved on the pillars. Streams of heaven and earth spiritual qi fell down like silk, passing through the pillars and falling to the ground. On the ground, there were two similar pentagon outlines. Layers of ripples appeared, and at first glance, it looked like water splashes. "Oh, this is a simple transportation array?" Xiao Hua's gaze fell, and he could already see something fishy. He couldn't help but be slightly startled. Then, he looked behind the memorial arch. Sure enough, there were three similar pentagon outlines, and they also had ripples of different colors. The two cultivators who had previously walked in front of Xiao Hua and the others looked left and right. They passed through the memorial arch and walked into the outlines. The two figures had just stood still when ripples gushed out like a fountain, covering the two. Light and shadow flashed, and the two figures disappeared. The two cultivators' figures had just disappeared when that huge pentagon-shaped memorial arch immediately emitted a five-colored brilliance. The brilliance gathered above the memorial arch, and the 6 large words Xiehong Mountain Auction House appeared out of thin air. These 6 large words were majestic and extraordinary. This is the work of Chu Pu Immortal Alliance's Alliance Master Wen Jiawen. It looks like it's nothing more than this. A very untimely voice floated along with the wind. Xiao Hua turned his head and saw that not more than 10 zhong away from him, a pretty female cultivator was whispering something to another man with delicate features. That female cultivator saw that Xiao Hua had seen it, and she fiercely glared at him. She used her hand to pull that man's sleeve and was about to pass through the memorial arch coincidentally. At this moment, woo-woo. A gust of wind blew, and those large words with golden hooks and iron characters turned into fireflies in the wind and slowly fell down. These fireflies fell near the 5 outlines, and unexpectedly turned into the phantoms of 5 graceful and outstanding women. Another cluster of fireflies fell directly below the memorial arch, and also turned into an elegant woman. That man was being pulled by the woman, and he walked hurriedly. He simply didn't care and rushed in front of the woman's phantoms. The man stared blankly. He wanted to stop, but when he saw that it was a phantom's, his figure simply flashed, wanting to pass through this phantom's. Ouch! Suddenly, a groaning sound came from the phantoms. The man was greatly alarmed and hastily stopped. Where his gaze fell, that phantoms actually rapidly solidified. A naked female cultivator was already standing in front of him, and those towering breasts almost collided with his body. Chapter 4893. The man's face was burning and he quickly retreated. The woman pulling his sleeve didn't notice this. At this moment, she was looking up at a shop with a gourd hanging on the stone wall. The man wanted to pull his sleeve out of her hand as he retreated. The woman raised her hand like lightning and grabbed the man's wrist. She pulled him back and said, "You still want to run?" The man was originally retreating, but now he was pulled forward by the woman. He was caught off guard and collided with the woman who had just solidified. Ah! The woman's solidified figure let out a low cry and fell back as if she didn't have any magic power. The woman next to the man woke up and hurriedly raised her other hand to support the woman's waist. She cried out, "Oh, sorry, Ro." Xiao Hua was originally looking at this farce, but when the woman stretched out her other hand, Xiao Hua was stunned. His gaze was attracted by a plum blossom mark on the woman's left wrist. This plum blossom mark looked very familiar. Xiao Hua felt like he had seen it somewhere before. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the woman had already steadied herself. Although her face was slightly red, she still bowed and said, "Welcome, fellow Taoists, to the Grand Spire Mountain Auction House. I'm the attendant of the Jingpeng Hall. I came out in a hurry and didn't notice you too. It's okay. It's okay." The man waved his hand shyly and said, "It's not your fault. I was in a hurry and offended you." The attendant pursed his lips and said with a smile, "I wonder what the two of you are here to buy at Xiehong Mountain. My Jingpeng Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If the two of you don't mind, I'm willing to introduce." The man was caught off guard and said with a smile, "We're here to, Wen Qing." Before the man finished speaking, the woman next to him shouted and interrupted him. She then said to the woman, "In that case, please lead the way. We'll go take a look." "That's great. Please." The woman was very happy and stepped to the side to make some space. The man named Wen Qing and the woman next to him walked into the outline. The light waves on the ground went against the flow and wrapped around the three of them. They disappeared in a moment. What surprised Xiao Hua was that the woman next to the man seemed to have noticed his gaze. Even before they were teleported, she still glared at him from the light waves. "Is it necessary?" Xiao Hua curled his lips slightly. "She's just a little girl who just stepped into the golden core realm. It's just." Xiao Hua curled his lips and then pinched his chin and thought, "Where have I seen that plum blossom mark? Is it in the 3 continents or the Dawn continent? Wen Qing. When? Is it related to the surname when mentioned?" While he was thinking, a rather sweet voice sounded from not far away, "Greetings, seniors. Welcome to my Xiehong mountain. What are you looking for in the auction house? I'm the attendant of the Jingpeng Hall. The Jingpeng Hall is a shop opened by the people of Yuhong Mountain. The medicinal pills, magic tools, cultivation methods, and so on are all available. If you're willing, I can give them to you. Xiao Hua raised his eyes and looked over, only to see that within the pentagonal outline on the left side of the memorial arch, another beautiful woman leisurely walked out from within, and was looking at them with a smile. No need. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "We'll walk around casually first." Liu Qingyu, who was at the side, said in a low voice, "Senior, I heard from Elder Yu that this Jingpeng Hall is a fair place. Moreover, because there are people from Yuhong Mountain, very few people will cause trouble here. Therefore, she usually trades in the Jingpeng Hall." "Yes, I know." Xiao Hua nodded and didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he passed through the archway and entered the valley. After passing through the archway, it was the auction house that Xiao Hua saw in the sky earlier. In the rather spacious valley, there were already many cultivators who were either stopping, strolling, or flying up and down. It looked very lively. When this lively scene fell into Xiao Hua's eyes, a feeling of being separated for a long time spontaneously arose from the bottom of his heart. According to the time of the Dawn continent, it was only 600 to 700 years, but Xiao Hua had experienced more than a few hundred years. After being separated for tens of thousands of years, seeing the auction house of the Dao sect again, that kind of familiarity and that kind of atmosphere easily evoked the memories in Xiao Hua's heart. Huff! Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to enter. Instead, he took a long breath and then exhaled. He greedily wanted to carve his homesickness into his soul. Faint sounds of bargaining and waves of faint magic power fluctuations attracted Xiao Hua's gaze everywhere. "Senior." A somewhat wooden and somewhat sonorous voice sounded from above Xiao Hua's head. "There are all kinds of puppets in this humble one's shop, which is a necessity for quiet cultivation and traveling. This humble one sees that Senior's magic power is profound and has remarkable abilities, so your vision must be extraordinary. Why don't you come to this humble one's shop to take a look? This humble one will definitely give Senior a discount." Xiao Hua raised his head and saw that on the rock wall that was more than 10 feet tall, there was a protrusion that was more than 10 feet in size. On top of it, there was a puppet that was several times the height of a person standing in midair. It waved at Xiao Hua, and its vividly painted face was piled up with a smile. "Let's go and take a look." Xiao Hua slightly smiled and said to Yu Hua and the others. He took the lead and walked towards the rock wall. "Senior." Yu Hua didn't dare to be negligent. She hurriedly flew to Xiao Hua's side and said somewhat awkwardly, "We don't have enough crystal stones. It's okay, this old man just wants to take a look." Xiao Hua's voice wasn't small. He didn't have any intention of hiding his intentions. He said with a smile, "I don't plan to buy anything." When Yu Hua heard this, her face became even redder. "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop." Xiao Hua's figure landed on the protrusion on the rock wall. The puppet immediately greeted him and said with a smile, "What kind of puppet does Senior need? What kind of puppets do you have in this shop? Can you introduce them to this old man?" Xiao Hua looked at the cave that was blocked by a restriction and asked. The puppet straightforwardly replied, reporting to Senior, "This humble one's shop has human puppets, beast puppets, and bird puppets. What kind does Senior need? Do you have soldier puppets?" Xiao Hua asked. "Ga oh ga." The puppet stuttered a few times and said again, "Senior, welcome to this humble one's shop. What kind of puppet does Senior need?" Chapter 4894. He, fellow Daoist, you must be joking. At this moment, light and shadow overflowed on the rock wall. A short but fat golden core cultivator hurriedly rushed out of the cave and cupped his hands towards Xiao Hua. "I'm Pang Tuojian, the owner of this shop. Greetings, fellow Daoist." Xiao Hua didn't reveal his cultivation at this time, and Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu behind him weren't golden core cultivators, so Pang Tuojian calling Xiao Hua fellow Daoist wasn't disrespectful. Xiao Hua smiled and returned the greeting. It's fine. This puppet is refined very well. It can be seen that fellow Daoist Pang is unique in refining puppets. You're too kind." Pang Tuojian's face showed a trace of pride, but his words were also humble. He raised his hand and said, "Fellow Daoist, you seem to be an expert in refining puppets. How about we have a chat inside the shop? I was just about to nag." Xiao Hua nodded and followed Pang Tuojian into the shop. After passing through the restriction on the rock wall, a space of several acres appeared in front of them. The four walls of the space were shining, illuminating the whole space. It looked no different from an ordinary shop. The space was divided into several areas. Some areas were filled with human-shaped, beast-shaped, and bird-shaped puppets. These puppets were neatly placed, and there were already many cultivators choosing them. Next to these areas were a few aura refining boys standing respectfully. There were also some damaged puppets in other areas, such as human-shaped arms or bird-shaped wings. The arrangement was a bit messy, and there were only one or two cultivators walking around casually. In the depths of the space, there was a place that occupied more than half of the space, where the materials used to refine puppets were piled up. There were even fewer cultivators there. Xiao Hua glanced around and didn't see any figures there. In an even smaller area, on the right side of the space, there were several shelves with some jade slips on them. They were presumably the methods to refine puppets. After looking at the layout of the shop, Xiao Hua walked towards the shelf on the right side of the space. The cultivator named Pang Tuojian was surprised and quickly followed behind Xiao Hua. "Fellow Daoist Pang." Looking at the restriction on the shelf, he thought for a moment and asked, "Your shop actually has so many methods to refine puppets?" "Hee hee." Hearing this, Pang Tuojian smiled and said in a low voice, "Fellow Daoist, you are obviously an expert in refining. Most of the Daoist friends who came to I's shop would choose puppets directly, and the rest would look for the materials they needed. Only half of them would come to the jade slip that recorded the sacrificial refining method. Since fellow Daoist is also an expert, I won't hide it from fellow Daoist. There seem to be many jade slips here, but in fact, most of them are the same." Xiao Hua smiled and said with a nod, "Fellow Daoist Pang is an honest person. To be honest, I was also surprised to see so many jade slips. I didn't think that there would be so many sacrificial refining methods in a place like the Fengyang Kingdom." "Of course." Pang Tuojian smiled obsequiously. Xiehong Mountain is a small place after all, and the Fengyang Kingdom is not famous for its refining. I only copied it after seeing it in the Enlightenment Environment Alliance's Universe auction. "Oh." Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he asked, "The Universe Auction Hall has so many puppet refinement methods?" "Of course," Pang Tuojian answered without hesitation. The Universe Auction Hall was opened by the disciple of the Enlightenment Alliance's Alliance Master, Qi Sanren. It mainly auctions for magic tools and magic treasures, and puppets are naturally one of them. Of course, there are countless sacrificial refining method. Xiao Hua's heart itched when he heard this, and he couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Pang, can you tell I what kind of sacrificial refining methods you've seen?" "Oh." Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Pang Tuojian raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Hua from top to bottom. With a fake smile, he asked, "If fellow Daoist wants to buy my shop's sacrificial refining method, I can naturally introduce it to you. But if fellow Daoist wants to come to my shop to broaden your horizons, then forgive me for not accompanying you. Of course, fellow Daoist can view them in I's shop, and I definitely won't chase fellow Daoist away." "How dare you?" Liu Qingyu couldn't help but scold, "Pang Tuojian, how can you speak to Senior Zhong like that?" "Senior Zhong?" When Pang Tuojian heard this, he couldn't help but panic. However, he looked at Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Since you're senior, then I'll tell you the truth. In my shop, as long as you have crystals, then you're my senior. If you don't have crystals and only want to look, then I won't accompany you even if you're senior. I'm doing business here according to the rules of the mountain people, so I'm not afraid of any senior causing trouble." After saying this, he turned around and walked away. Perhaps because Liu Qingyu called him senior, he didn't dare to offend Liu Qingyu too much. He even called a qi refining boy over to accompany him. "Forget it." Xiao Hua smiled faintly and stopped the boy who was refining qi. Although he didn't know how many jade slips there were on the shelf in front of him, he knew that while the Dawn Rain continent was in dire shortage of jade slips for cultivation techniques, weapon refining techniques, alchemy techniques, and so on, the Yilin continent was filled with jade slips for cultivation techniques. This also caused the Yilin continent to have far more Daoist cultivators than the Dawnrain continent, and the Daoist cultivators' realm and strength were also far higher than the Dawnrain continent. Of course, he also understood that no matter how many cultivation techniques there were, human nature was always so real. Damn it! Yu Hua couldn't help but shout, he's such a snob. Although we don't have many crystals, but… Haha, but what? Xiao Hua laughed and said, don't be fooled by him. He's not the only one bidding for cultivation techniques to refine puppets in this auction. If we want to buy them, we have to go to another shop. That's right. Even if he's the only shop in this auction, we can still go to Qiyu auction. Nuo Yeching said fiercely. Ha ha ha. That's right. Let's go. Liu Qingyu also laughed loudly and followed Xiao Hua out of the shop. After leaving the shop, Xiao Hua smiled and said to Liu Qingyu, Qingyu, it seems that without crystals, I can't even be a senior anymore. Let's hurry up and find a place to bid. Let's first sell some cultivation methods and get some crystal stones. Senior, I'll let you know. Liu Qingyu, who had been standing on both sides of the valley, replied, Senior, these shops on the stone wall are all for sale. The auction should still be in the valley. Previously, this junior specially asked Elder Yuan. Other than selling cultivation techniques to Jing Pengtang, there's another way to sell them at the auction. As for when the auction will start, this junior doesn't know. If senior wants to know, this junior will go and find out. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Chijian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and give it a tip. Chapter 4895. Go quickly. Xiao Hua nodded. Yes. Liu Qingyu agreed. Just as he was about to fly away, Yu Hua spoke again. Junior Marshal Brother Liu, please wait a moment. What's the matter, Senior Marshal Sister? Liu Qingyu stopped and asked. Yu Hua said to Xiao Hua, Senior, Junior wants to go with Junior Marshal Brother Liu. When we find the place of the auction, Junior will first show the jade slips we prepared. If Senior is interested, why don't you let Yi Qing take you around the auction house of Xiehong Mountain? Xiao Hua nodded. He raised his hand and pointed to the side of the valley and said, Go ahead. This old man and Yi Qing will walk slowly along this valley. When you find something, come and find us. Okay. Yu Hua said and gave a few messaging talismans to Nuo Yeching. Then, she hurriedly flew into the valley with Liu Qingyu. Afterwards, Xiao Hua strolled around many shops with great interest. They either sold talismans, medicinal pills, magic tools, or materials. Just as Xiao Hua thought, in the shops that sold talismans, whether it was the materials used to make talismans or the method to refine talismans, they were all complete. There was no shortage or defect. All kinds of talisman brushes, talisman papers, talisman inks, fireball talismans, icicle talismans, and so on were placed on jade shelves or restrictions, allowing people to bid and buy at will. In the shops that sold medicinal pills, there were all kinds of spiritual grasses and spiritual fruits. Some of them were even unknown to Xiao Hua. Especially the pill recipes that Xiao Hua cared about, they were all complete and there was no defect. Just the medicinal pills that qi refining cultivators could take, there were over 100 kinds in one shop. In the shops that sold magic tools, all kinds of magic tools were placed in an orderly manner. There were also all kinds of refining materials. As for the refining method, just like what he saw before, all kinds of jade slips were also available for purchase. What made Xiao Hua sigh with emotion was that in a small shop, Xiao Hua also saw the complete cultivation methods of qi refining, foundation establishment, and jindan. Moreover, the owner of the shop also promised that if Xiao Hua had enough crystal stones, he could provide the complete cultivation methods of yuanying and divining. Coming out of the shop, Xiao Hua looked at the setting sun in the valley and could not help but sigh in his heart. Ari, this Yilin continent, is indeed a paradise for Daoist cultivators. Not to mention some large city, even this tiny Xiehong Mountain auction ground is like heaven and earth when compared to Dawn Rain continent. When Xiao Hua first came to the auction house, on one hand, he wanted to obtain some crystal stones. On the other hand, he wanted to plunder some cultivation methods and pill recipes. But after looking around for so long, Xiao Hua discovered that this place was still desolate. Cultivation methods and pill recipes were still of a low level. He already had a lot of these things in his space, so there was nothing he wanted to buy. Not to mention that he didn't have too many crystal stones right now. Senior. At this time, Nuo Yeching whispered, Master has been gone for a long time and hasn't come back. Junior had sent a message earlier, but Master didn't come back. Could it be that something happened? Xiao Hua also felt a bit strange, but he smiled and said, it should be fine. This old man has been observing all this time. The Xiehong Mountain auction ground is for foundation establishment and aura refining cultivators. Aura's core disciples only account for 20%, and there are only a few nascent soul cultivators. Your master and the others are all in the Aura's core realm, so there shouldn't be any problems in this auction ground. Let's go. This old man also doesn't want to look anymore. We'll go look for them. Yes, this junior has just inquired. The auction ground that Master mentioned just now is right in front of us, Nuo Yeching said and pointed to a bright and resplendent place in the distance of the valley. The valley was not perfectly straight. When Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeching turned a big corner, they discovered that there was a hill-like protrusion in that place. It bulged out from the stone wall, and there were many holes on it. Many cultivators were flying into these holes from various places. Let's go, let's go. Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeching had just flown close when they heard the extremely excited shouts of several young aura refining disciples above them. If we're late, I'm afraid we won't be able to snatch it. My goodness, it's actually a cultivation method that relies on the mutated spiritual qi to cultivate. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Although these disciples had already flown past, their voices still floated into Xiao Hua's ears. Of course, I've been cultivating with my sect's cultivation method for several years, but I haven't made any progress. I thought there was something wrong with my cultivation, but Master secretly told me that it wasn't my problem, it was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Hee, look. Xiao Hua said with a slight smile, your master made a big move. Even if you sent 10 summoning talismans, I'm afraid he still wouldn't be able to get away. This is all due to Senior's merit. Nuo Yeching said very respectfully. Merit? Xiao Hua was slightly surprised and looked up and down at Nuo Yeching. Nuo Yeching hastily sped up and said, Senior, let's quickly go and help Master. Xiao Hua smiled and didn't ask much. His figure streaked across the air and strode towards the light shadow. Without waiting for Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeching's figures to fall into the cave, they saw several qi refining disciples excitedly flying out. As they flew, they whispered, haha, we've made a fortune. Such a miraculous cultivation method is actually sold so cheaply. If I were to sell it, I wouldn't sell it for less than 10 top-grade crystals. What do you know? Another qi refining disciple also happily said with a smile, this is called small profits but quick turnover. A qi refining cultivation method that costs 10 top-grade crystals. Who would buy it? Do you think I can afford it? Senior brother. One of the female cultivators with ponytails blinked her big eyes and asked in a low voice, such a cheap cultivation method, could it be fake? Who would have such a good cultivation method and not keep it for themselves? Why would they take it here and casually sell it? Didn't they say it already? This cultivation method was modified by their grandmaster. They still have a lot of it. Because they know that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth has changed, many cultivators' cultivation methods are not suitable anymore. That's why they took it out to sell. Another disciple immediately explained, moreover, they also said that this cultivation method is easy to modify. If they don't sell it now, they won't be able to sell it in the future when all the sects and clans modify it. Fourth senior brother is right. Another disciple smiled and said, you may not know. This little brother went there early. Previously, when they were selling it, no one believed them at all. This little brother also took a look and didn't dare to buy it. But later, 2 nascent soul stage seniors suddenly came. These 2 nascent soul stage seniors seemed to be looking for something. They asked one stall after another. When they arrived in front of these 2 seniors, they didn't say anything and took out crystals to buy it. Moreover, after buying it, they immediately left. At that time, This little brother realized that these two seniors had already sold it here before. Therefore, these two nascent soul stage seniors came again to look for it. This little brother hurriedly sent a message to my fellow senior brothers. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chidyen to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote, vote for a recommendation vote, collect, reward, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4896. Maybe those two nascent soul stage seniors were also acting? The female disciple still didn't dare to believe it. However, as they spoke, they gradually flew away. Xiao Hua didn't know how the others would explain it. Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeching landed at the entrance of the cave. In front of them was a large hall, about 100 feet in size. The hall was transparent from top to bottom, left to right, and they could clearly see some figures moving about inside. At the end of the hall, there were several doors of the same size. In front of these doors, there were cultivators guarding them. Inside the hall, there were naturally cultivators flying in front of Xiao Hua. They quickly walked through the doors, took out a crystal, and handed it to the cultivators guarding the door. Xiao Hua understood that these guards should be the disciples of Yuhong Mountain. Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeching walked to the door. The guard asked politely, "Seniors, do you want to sell something or buy something?" Nuo Yeching hurriedly asked, "What about selling and buying?" "I'll let you know." The guard hurriedly replied, "If you want to sell something, you'll have to pay a mid-grade crystal. Junior will give you a token, and you can find a stall inside. If you want to buy something, you'll only have to pay a mid-grade crystal." Nuo Yeching looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Your master has already paid a mid-grade crystal. What else do we have to pay? 2 low-grade crystals are enough." "Yes, senior," Nuo Yeching responded. She took out 2 low-grade crystals from her storage ring and handed them to the guard. After he finished speaking, he respectfully asked the two to enter. When he was outside the door, he didn't feel that there was anything noisy inside. But when Xiao Hua stepped through the door, a burst of noise surged like waves. Xiao Hua couldn't help but frown slightly. Xiao Hua released his divine sense to explore and saw that this was a palace that was dozens of acres in size. It was somewhat similar to the auction house he had seen in Jingbua City. The entire palace was divided into several areas, and each area was divided into many small sections. The items sold in the small sections of each area were different. Some were pills, some were magic tools, some were jade slips, and so on. There were quite a few cultivators in every region, some whispering, some clamoring, all of them haggling, just like the marketplace of the secular world. In the most central area, there were many cultivators gathered around a grid. These cultivators looked a little crazy and were desperately trying to squeeze to the nearest grid. They even shouted, "Senior, this is my crystal. Please give me the cultivation method. My attribute is..." Fellow Taoists, fellow Taoists. Liu Qingyu's weary voice sounded amidst the clamor, "Don't be in such a hurry. One by one, all right? I've prepared a lot of jade slips here, enough for each of you. Senior, Junior wants to bring one for junior sister. My junior sister is of the water attribute. Senior, I have 4 junior sisters. They are of the water attribute and the fire attribute respectively." "Oh?" Hearing this, Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Yi Qing, when did your master copy so many jade slips?" "Sure." Nuo Yeching whispered, "Senior, my master is a moneygrubber. I'm afraid that when he heard that you were coming to the auction, he didn't stay idle all the way." "Ha ha ha." Xiao Hua laughed. He immediately remembered that when he came out of the puppet shop, Liu Qingyu was anxiously looking for the auction. It seemed that he had already prepared. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't have any intention to blame, Nuo Yeching said again, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. Junior will go and help my master." "Okay." Xiao Hua nodded and said, "This old man will go and look at other places." However, before Xiao Hua finished speaking, he frowned and said indifferently, "You don't have to go first. It seems that there's a good show to watch." "Oh." Nuo Yeching was slightly stunned and somewhat puzzled. However, she didn't need to look far away. In a door not far from her, a dozen Golden Core Realm cultivators wearing bright armor walked out with a spirit-severing stage cultivator around them. They went straight to the crowd of cultivators. Senior, are these people from Xiehong Mountains, Yuhong Mountain? Nuo Yeqing was shocked and immediately understood something. She whispered, it must be that master and martial uncle's bidding for the cultivation method attracted his attention. That's right. Xiao Hua's expression didn't change. He withdrew his gaze from other places and waved his hand. I'll go and take a look and see what this guy plans to do. Yes, senior. Nuo Yeqing stole a glance at Xiao Hua. She suddenly felt that Xiao Hua was very similar to a person she was very familiar with. However, looking at Xiao Hua's back and Xiao Hua's expression of contempt for the spirit-severing stage cultivator, she shook her head with a bitter smile. Since Xiao Hua noticed the arrival of a group of Golden Core Realm cultivators, the cultivators standing around the aura refining disciples to watch the show naturally also noticed them. They hastily made way for them, and some cultivators who were familiar with Yuhong Mountain hurriedly greeted them. Yuhong Mountain had a smile on his face. He very elegantly nodded to the surrounding people, and from time to time, he would even raise his hand to signal. He looked very amiable and approachable. When the Golden Core Realm cultivators arrived behind the aura refining disciples, they naturally didn't berate them like the people of the secular world. They released their spiritual pressure, and those aura refining disciples immediately sensed it. Although their faces were full of displeasure, they still stopped shouting and obediently made way for the lattice. Through the gaps in the crowd, Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu's somewhat tired figures appeared. Oh my, so it's the two fellow Taoists from the Chanhe school. More than 10 Golden Core Realm cultivators surrounded the lattice, blocking the other cultivators outside. Yuhong Mountain walked over with a surprised expression. He cupped his hands and said, this old man was wondering who it was. We've really neglected you. Seeing the spirit-severing stage cultivator salute them, Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu were somewhat terrified. They hastily came out from the lattice and respectfully bowed. Junior greets Yuhong Mountain. Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Yuhong Mountain waved his hand and said with a smile, this old man is very familiar with your sect head Liu. Last time, your elder Yu came to my Jingpeng Hall to sell some method for selecting spiritual roots. This old man just happened to not be in the auction house. I only found out after I came back. This old man was just thinking of finding a time to go to Xingyun Ridge. What a coincidence, you guys actually came first. Come, let's go to the Jingpeng Hall. This old man will let the disciples serve tea. You guys wait and tell this old man what's going on. Why is it so lively? This. Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu were somewhat hesitant. They didn't expect that just selling some aura refining cultivation methods would attract Yuhong Mountain's attention. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chidian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, bookmark, and reward. Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4897. What? My Jingpeng Hall can't accommodate 2 fellow Taoists. My spirit tea isn't worthy of 2 Golden Core cultivators. Hermit Yuhong was a little displeased when he saw the two hesitating and asked coldly. Yu Hua didn't dare to hesitate and hurriedly said with a smile, it's our fortune to be able to drink tea at Jingpeng Hall. However, if we go, these Qi refinement disciples will be disappointed. Why don't we wait until we sell the remaining jade slips before going to talk with Senior? That's right, Senior Yuhong. An aura refining disciple who seemed to have some background said loudly, Junior just came from Jingpeng Hall to buy a suitable aura refining cultivation method for Junior. Senior, you invited these 2 seniors, so wouldn't Junior and the others have come in vain? You're a disciple of Danxiao countries who are Zun sect, right? Hermit Yuhong smiled and asked softly. His tone was like the benevolence of an elder towards a junior. The disciple was shocked and hurriedly bowed. Senior is a god. This junior is Hua Zun sect's disciple, Ju Fen. This junior didn't expect Senior to have seen this junior. This junior greets Senior. He. Hermit Yuhong waved his hand and helped the disciple up. There's no need to be so polite. Anyone who comes to my Xiehong Mountains auction house is my guest. Moreover, Fairy Qingyang is a senior that I greatly respect. Her disciple came to my auction house, so I definitely can't let her disciple be deceived. Ah! What do you mean? Ju Fen was shocked and looked at Hermit Yuhong in confusion. He didn't seem to understand what he was saying. At this moment, Hermit Yuhong looked up at the Qi refinement disciples on his left and said loudly, "This Ju Fen is Fairy Qingyan's disciple. I can't let him be deceived. Although you're not Fairy Qingyan's disciples, you're my guest since you came to my Xiehong Mountains auction house. If you're deceived in the auction house, how can I face your seniors? This old man is a loose cultivator, so I know how difficult it is to cultivate. I also hate the dangers of fake cultivation techniques, so, in this old man's auction, I will absolutely not allow fake cultivation techniques to exist." When they heard up to here, not to mention Ju Fen, even all the nearby Qi refinement cultivators came to an understanding. Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu's faces even flushed red, and they opened their mouths with the intention of arguing. However, when Master Yuhong spoke up to here, he still didn't point it out, so it was impossible for them to brace themselves and forcefully claim this stain. "That's not right. Senior," Ju Fen hurriedly said, "Junior has just heard from some fellow Taoists that this cultivation method was identified by 2 nascent soul stage seniors before being sold. Sigh, all of you are still too inexperienced." Hermit Yuhong said earnestly, "Who are those 2 nascent soul seniors? Where are they? How do you know that those 2 nascent soul seniors are not the masters of these 2 gold core cultivators? Just think about it, a cultivation method that can be used to mutate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, in this world, that is a priceless treasure. If they had it, why would they sell it here instead of cultivating it themselves? And, why would they sell it so cheaply?" But, Ju Fen still asked, "Didn't many Qi refinement disciples already buy it earlier? I didn't see them return." Sigh, this is the brilliance of the 2 gold core disciples of Chan He sect. Hermit Yuhong sighed again. For a cultivation method to be sold cheaply, regardless of whether it is real or not, it should still be worth that little bit of crystal, right? Ju Fen, think about it yourself. If you discovered that there was a problem with this cultivation method, would you return here for that little bit of crystal? You still have the face to say that you were deceived and cheated. Senior. Yu Hua couldn't help but raise her voice. Have you seen Junior's cultivation method? How can you be so sure that Junior's cultivation method is fake? Hee hee. Hermit Yuhong laughed. His gaze was like lightning as he looked at Yu Hua and said, "Do you still need me to see it? How can I not know what kind of foundation your Chan He sect has? A sect controlled by a nascent soul cultivator can't even compare to my auction house. How can it have such a miraculous cultivation method? Previously, I already said that if I were Liu Hanhuan and obtained such a powerful cultivation method, I would have hidden it in Xingyun Ridge and started training my own disciples. Why would I sell it here? I won't hide it from you." Previously, when Yu Zhuohong came to sell some spirit root selection technique, my heart jumped when I heard it. Since when did the so-called spirit root appear in this world? Deceiving others in my Jingpeng Hall is equivalent to slapping my face. I haven't even gone to Xingyun Ridge, but you actually came to me again. I gave Liu Hanhuan face and wanted you to follow me quietly. Since you are unwilling, don't blame me for being impolite. Liu Qingyu was still arguing. He handed the jade slip to Hermit Yuhong and said, "Senior, please take a look. This is really a cultivation method suitable for mutated spirit qi. This cultivation method doesn't belong to my Chan He sect." Pa! Hermit Yuhong's sleeves shook, and the jade slip in Liu Qingyu's hand shattered into pieces. Hermit Yuhong said coldly, "Do you think I am slandering you? When you were selling it just now, you had already attracted the attention of my disciples. They had already given me the fake cultivation method you were selling. If I wasn't confident, why would I come here to undermine you? Despicable, truly despicable." Ju Fen naturally believed Hermit Yuhong's words. He looked at Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu and said, "You are actually so despicable. When I return to the sect, I will definitely report this to my master. Fengyang Kingdom's Chan He sect actually deceived us Qi refinement disciples. Their actions are too despicable. Let's go." A few golden core disciples on the left stepped forward and said coldly, "The 2 of you, follow me to the Jingpeng Hall." After the patriarch deals with you, let your sect master come and ask for punishment. Damn it. Yu Hua gritted her teeth and pointed at Yuhong Mountain. Senior Yuhong, if you covet this cultivation technique, you can discuss it with me. You can split it 30 to 70, 50 to 50, or even 30 to 70 is fine too. You are actually so vicious that you want to take it all for yourself. You are really too sanctimonious. Chimpage. Hermit Yuhong sneered. You are really biting back. I am in charge of such a large auction, so why would I care about your few cultivation methods? What I care about is the reputation of my auction. Disciples, why aren't you making a move? Don't ruin my auction's reputation. Yes. The group of Golden Core disciples said. Two of them raised their hands to grab Yu Hua and Liu Qingyu. How dare you? Xiao Hua cursed angrily and stepped forward. At this moment, a voice came from afar. Wait, I have something to say. Vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, tip it, and thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 4898. Oh, who is this? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. He raised his head and saw an old man in embroidered clothes flying down from a door 1 floor above the palace. Behind this old man, several young disciples were excitedly accompanying him. Wen Qing and the female disciple with the plum blossom symbol on her wrist that Xiao Hua had previously seen were impressively before his eyes. Interesting. Xiao Hua pinched his chin, and his eyes flashed with a thoughtful expression. However, just as Xiao Hua was pondering, he was suddenly startled, and he exclaimed in his heart, Ayo, this Xiao remembers now. This plum blossom seems to be a plum blossom-shaped command token that this Xiao saw in the pile of bones on the 4th floor of the Inkcloud Black Forest many years ago, right? That's right. This plum blossom is different from ordinary plum blossoms. It actually has 7 petals. Could it be that this woman is related to the bones? If that's the case, then it's interesting. A token from the Yilin continent actually ran to the Dawn Rain continent. This can only mean that the owner of the bones knows the transmission passage of the Wuming mountain range and went to the Dawn Rain continent from here. Moreover, they even went to the Inkcloud Black Forest. The hermit from Yuhong Mountain frowned slightly when he saw the two people suddenly speaking. However, when his gaze swept past Xiao Hua and Nuo Yeqing beside him, he immediately understood something. He shifted his gaze away from the two people and looked at the old man. When the Yuhong Mountain person saw that the old man was actually a late nascent soul stage cultivator, he couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't dare to be too negligent and cupped his hands and asked, "Oh? This fellow Daoist looks very unfamiliar. He doesn't seem to be a cultivator of my Tsupu Immortal Alliance. Does fellow Daoist have anything to say?" The late nascent soul stage old man naturally also glanced at Xiao Hua, who spoke at the same time. However, Xiao Hua's cultivation had already been revealed. It was only around the nascent soul stage. After the old man saw it, he ignored the Yuhong Mountain person and asked the woman beside him in a low voice, "Qing are you sure it's these cultivators?" The nascent soul stage old man's words were very sudden. Not to mention the Yuhong Mountain person, even Xiao Hua was surprised when he heard it. He and the others had only met them twice when they entered the Xiehong Mountain auction house. He had even been glared at by this woman for no reason. Now, she had actually come knocking on his door. It was truly baffling. On the other hand, the Yuhong Mountain cultivator was surprised. He looked at the group of disciples behind the yuanying old man and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. "Reporting to Granduncle." The woman called Jing hastily replied, "It's these cultivators." "Are you sure?" The nascent soul old man frowned slightly. He looked at the Yuhong hermit, who was also silent, and could not help but ask. The girl named Jing bit her lips and thought for a while. Then she said, "Boy is sure." At the time, the boy was searching the Jingpeng Hall. However, after searching for a long time, he did not find any clues. Thus, the boy asked the Jingpeng Hall disciple. The Jingpeng Hall disciple did not dare to easily answer. He took the boy to find the so-called Jingpeng Hall master. When the boy saw the Jingpeng Hall master, this senior Yuhong was also in the Jingpeng Hall. Before the boy could greet him, he saw a few golden core cultivators rush in from outside. They took out a jade slip and reported to Senior Yuhong, the Chanhe sect disciple who sold the spirit root a few days ago has come again. The senior's expression changed. Damn it. Then he took the jade slip from the disciple and hurried into the secret room. The boy did not dare to delay and quickly sent a message to Granduncle. Now that Senior Yuhong is here, I presume these cultivators are. The nascent soul old man nodded slightly. Then, he cupped his hands and bowed to the Yuhong hermit. He said, "Greetings, fellow Daoist Yuhong." Hearing this nascent soul old man call him fellow Daoist, the Yuhong hermit narrowed his eyes. He did not return the greeting and asked indifferently, "Who are you?" Heh. The nascent soul old man smiled faintly and said a few words via voice transmission. The expression of the Yuhong mountain man changed slightly. Although he was somewhat unwilling, he still raised his hand and forced a smile. Heh, it's actually guests from afar. This is truly beyond this old man's expectations. This old man represents the Xiehong Mountain auction to welcome all of you. I wouldn't dare. The nascent soul old man said proudly. I was just bringing my disciples to train nearby and passed by the Xiehong Mountain auction house. Fellow Daoist, you don't have to be so polite. With that, the nascent soul old man looked at Xiao Hua and the others and asked curiously, I wonder how these disciples of the Chan He sect offended you, fellow Daoist? Although the Yuhong hermit was unwilling to offend the power behind this old man, he was definitely not afraid of this old man. Therefore, he replied coldly, this is my Xiehong Mountains matter. It should have nothing to do with you, fellow Daoist. Hehe, that's true. The old man replied with a smile. Then, he asked again, however, I wonder if you would mind if I ask them a few questions? Please. The Yuhong hermit spat out a word. He stood there with his hands behind his back and looked coldly. I won't tell you my name now. The nascent soul old man did not even say his name to the Yuhong hermit. Now, how could he tell his name to Yu Hua and the other disciples who were only in the Golden Core realm? He looked at Xiao Hua and asked, I would like to ask if the so-called spirit root selection method that was sold here a while ago, is it your Chan He sect's cultivation method? Yes. Xiao Hua smiled. Does fellow Daoist have any questions? The old man did not immediately believe him and asked, can you let me see this spirit root selection method? Xiao Hua naturally did not have it, so he turned to Yu Hua and said, let this fellow Daoist have a look. Yu Hua did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly took out several jade slips from her storage ring and respectfully handed them over. The nascent soul old man took the jade slips and looked at them. A smile appeared on his face. He thought for a moment and asked, I want these spirit root selection methods. How many crystals do I need? Normally, Yu Hua would definitely not ask for crystals and would definitely ask the nascent soul old man for help. However, today was different. She looked at Xiao Hua's calm appearance and said with a smile, 1 jade slip for 1 mid-grade crystal. Senior only needs to give this junior 4 pieces. Okay. The nascent soul old man was a little surprised at the cheap price of this cultivation method. However, he did not hesitate and ordered the disciple next to him to give her 4 mid-grade crystals. Seeing Yu Hua accept the crystals, the nascent soul old man asked again, to tell you the truth, I have seen your Chan He sect's spirit root selection method before. I feel that although this cultivation method is incredible, it is also very practical. I have specially tested some disciples with it, and the results are very good. Of course, Yu Hua said proudly, my Chan He sect uses this spirit root selection method to select disciples. Well, if that's the case, then this old man did not come here in vain. The nascent soul old man's smile deepened. He said, little friend, can you bring this old man to the Chan He sect and pay a visit to your sect master? This. Yu Hua was a little hesitant. She asked in return, this junior has some matters to attend to. I'm afraid it's not good for me to return now. Does senior have any important matters? Fellow Daoist Wen. Hermit Yuhong smiled. The Chan He sect is not far from here. If fellow Daoist wants to go, I can send a disciple to take you there. Hearing Hermit Yuhong call him by his name, Old Man Wen was a bit unhappy. He looked at Hermit Yuhong and said, This old man has his own plans. This old man thanks fellow Daoist for your kindness. Old man Wen thought for a moment and then said politely to Yu Hua, it's like this. This old man has seen your Chan He sect's spirit root selection method. I can also use this method to find suitable disciples with spirit roots. However, this old man feels that my current cultivation method is not suitable for these disciples, so this old man wants to ask if your Chan He sect has such a cultivation method. This old man can pay the price your Chan He sect wants. Hehe, if that's the case, then Senior doesn't need to go to Xingyun Ridge. Yu Hua was overjoyed. She waved the jade slip in her hand and smiled. This junior is selling the cultivation method Senior mentioned. There's no special price. Each jade slip costs 10 mid-grade crystals. Ah! 10 mid-grade crystals? Old man Wen was shocked and shouted, how is that possible? Are you talking about the cultivation method for spirit roots? Of course not. Hermit Yuhong coldly said, if there is such a cultivation method, how can it be sold for 10 mid-grade crystals? This old man has already seen it. This cultivation method is fake. Hermit Yuhong's words were firm and his gaze was cold as he looked at Old Man Wen. Old Man Wen was startled. He looked around and seemed to understand something. When Yu Hua saw this, she didn't scream loudly. Instead, she calmly handed the jade slip to Old Man Wen and said, whether it is real or not, Senior will know once you see it. Yu Hua's actions seemed very simple, but it forced Old Man Wen into a dilemma. Yuhong Mountain Hermit had already said that the cultivation method in the jade slip was fake. Even if Old Man Wen saw it, he wouldn't be able to say anything. Although Old Man Wen looked down on Hermit Yuhong, he didn't want to offend a spirit-severing cultivator. But if Old Man Wen didn't take the jade slip, then what was the point of everything he said before? Little friend, you're making this difficult for me. Old Man Wen rubbed his chin and smiled. This old man doesn't know what to choose. Although Yu Hua was a golden core cultivator, she was no longer as timid as before. She replied in a neither haughty nor humble manner, Senior wanted to see the spiritual root selection method, so I gave it to Senior. Senior wanted to see the spiritual root cultivation method, so I gave it to Senior. Whether Senior wants to see it or not, whether Senior can distinguish it or not, and whether Senior dares to tell the truth, that's up to Senior. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe at Chidian. Vote for it, give it a gift, and Chapter 4899. Yu Hua kept saying that she didn't dare to make things difficult for them, but her words had the meaning of do you dare or not. Not only did Old Man Wen understand, but even the cultivators on Mount Yuhong and the rest of the cultivators knew clearly in their heart. Half of the Qi refinement cultivators present were confused, but they were like ordinary people and liked to watch a show. Although they didn't dare to offend Yuhong Mountain, they liked to see others offend Yuhong Mountain, especially a nascent soul cultivator who didn't put Yuhong Mountain in his eyes. Although he wasn't the center of attention, Old Man Wen's hesitation gradually disappeared. He smiled and took the jade slip. This old man wants to see what kind of outstanding Qi refinement cultivation method a small Chanhe sect can modify. Yuhong Mountain's face sank and asked, fellow Daoist, are you sure you want to see it? Old Man Wen smiled and replied, this old man already has the jade slip in my hand. How can I not see it? This old man will listen to the explanation. Yuhong Mountain's response was followed by another step to Old Man Wen's feet. Because he was already prepared, Old Man Wen's expression didn't change as he looked through the jade slip. This disappointed the Qi refinement cultivators. How is it? Seeing Old Man Wen put down the jade slip, Yuhong Mountain smiled. This old man is right? Although Yu Hua didn't expect a miracle, she still stared at Old Man Wen without blinking. She hoped that she would hear the truth from his mouth. Ha ha! Old Man Wen faintly smiled and glanced at Hermit Yuhong. Just as he was about to speak, a low rumbling sound came from the arm of a tall disciple behind him. That disciple didn't hesitate at all. He closed his eyes and sent his divine sense into his arm. His face was filled with absolute respect. Not to mention that disciple, even the disciples near that disciple, although they didn't know what that disciple had heard, all straightened their backs and became even more respectful than before. Since all the disciples were like this, Old Master Wen was naturally no exception. He stopped and the smile on his face disappeared as he waited for the disciple to speak. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the disciple withdrew his spiritual sense and lowered his arm before sending a voice transmission to Old Man Wen. Old Man Wen had a look of surprise on his face. He nodded, indicating that he understood, and then looked at Yu Hua. However, Old Man Wen didn't say anything and seemed to be thinking about something. Yu Hua didn't understand, but she didn't avoid it. Her eyes were like lightning as she met the old man's aggressive gaze. Being Yuhong Mountain was a little impatient and urged, "Fellow Daoist." Old Man Wen raised his hand to signal the Yuhong Mountain people to shut up. He then transmitted his voice to Yu Hua, "Little friend, this old man would like to ask you a question." Yu Hua sneered and said, "Senior, you can ask me anything. I'll tell you everything I know. Junior isn't like some cultivators who act one way in front of you and another behind your back, always engaging in some shady business like robbers and prostitute." With that said, Yu Hua swept her gaze across Hermit Yuhong. Hermit Yuhong was furious. It was clear that Yu Hua was cursing him indirectly. She was clearly planning to destroy both jade and stone. Damn it. Unfortunately, before Hermit Yuhong could get angry, the female cultivator immediately scolded, "You don't want to live anymore? How can you speak to my granduncle like that?" Oh! Yu Hua was startled. She didn't know if this female cultivator was helping her or scolding her. Fortunately, Old Man Wen heard this and smiled. This old man's question is actually very simple, because this spirit root selection technique is very miraculous. Based on my deduction, this spirit root selection technique is definitely not something your Chan He sect can create. So this old man wants to ask, "Do you know where your sect master obtained this secret method?" Old Man Wen wanted to see what Old Man Wen's goal was. At the same time, he wanted to see what Old Man Wen was up to. Xiao Hua had no choice but to step forward. However, before he could take a step, Yu Hua, who was already prepared, said with a smile, "Senior, what you want to know is very simple. But this junior wants to ask you whether this junior's cultivation method is real or not." Cough cough. Old Man Wen coughed a few times and smiled. "Little friend, if you don't say it, this old man can go to Xingyun Ridge and ask your sect master." Damn, this old fox. Xiao Hua smiled and cursed. "You don't need to go to Xingyun Ridge. That spirit root selection method is eyes." Ah! Old Man Wen was shocked. Even Hermit Yuhong's eyelids jumped. Everyone's gaze landed on Xiao Hua. After Old Man Wen thought about Xiao Hua's answer, he cautiously probed. Then, "Fellow Daoist, is this selection method your own? Or did you get it from somewhere else?" Then. "Fellow Daoist, I want to ask you, is the chi refinement method in your hand real or fake? Or is it fake?" Xiao Hua asked with a smile. Old Man Wen narrowed his eyes and replied, "So what if it's real or fake? If it's real, then it's real. If it's fake, then it's fake." The smile on Xiao Hua's face gradually disappeared as he replied, "This poor Daoist only wants to hear one sentence from you. Is this old man's words very important?" Old Man Wen still wanted to evade. Xiao Hua didn't give him any leeway and replied, "Of course it's important. Your words will determine whether what you want is the truth or a lie." Cough cough. Hermit Yuhong coughed a few times and smiled. "Forgive this old man for being blind, but where is this fellow Daoist from? My Chu Pu Immortal Alliance doesn't seem to have someone like fellow Daoist." "Hermit Yuhong," Xiao Hua said indifferently. "Chu Pu Immortal Alliance is so big and has so many nascent soul cultivators. Could it be that you can recognize all of them?" Hermit Yuhong laughed. "Fellow Daoist is right, this old man can recognize all of them." With that, Hermit Yuhong raised his hand and pointed to a high platform at the side of the hall. Since the spiritual root selection method is fellow Daoists, then this modified cultivation method should also be fellow Daoists, right? This old man said that the cultivation method is fake, but you yourself think it's real. Right now, there's this fellow Daoist from afar here. You and I will go to the warning platform to check and ask this fellow Daoist to be a witness so that you can give up. TCH. Yu Hua sneered and replied, Hermit Yu Hong, do you think we are fools? There are many people here and no one there. When we go to the warning platform, no one will know if we are killed by you. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chijian to subscribe to support, vote for a month, vote for a recommendation, collect, reward, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 4900. Hehe, if this old man wanted to make a move, why would I waste so much time with you? Hermit Yu Hong said proudly, if this old man wanted to kill all of you, even though there are so many people here, who can stop this old man? Moreover, this fellow Daoist is a famous figure from afar. To be honest, he has more weight than all the cultivators in the hall. Senior. Yu Hua hesitated and turned to look at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate and smiled, then let's listen to him. Alright, everyone, please. Hermit Yu Hong wasn't surprised by Xiao Hua's choice. Instead, he smiled and gestured to Xiao Hua. Before he stepped forward, he gave Old Man Wen a meaningful look. Hermit Yu Hong was the first to lead the group of Golden Core disciples to land on the high platform. The disciples who were standing guard on the high platform hurriedly flew down. Once the few Golden Core disciples had finished setting up the high platform, Hermit Yu Hong sat on a jade chair and calmly looked at everyone. Let's go. Xiao Hua ignored Old Man Wen and flew up the high platform with Yu Hua and the others. At this time, Xiao Hua was already able to use simple flying techniques. No one could see anything from his magic power. Granduncle. A few disciples whispered, this Hermit Yu Hong has some impure intentions. Junior won't go up. We'll be on guard below. Hee hee. Hermit Yu Hong smiled and said, I just want to see what is selling in his gourd. You all go up as well. In this auction, it's the same no matter where you are. Yes, Granduncle. The disciples agreed and flew up the high platform with Old Man Wen. The high platform didn't look big from below, but when Xiao Hua and the others landed on it, they realized that there were dozens of people on the high platform. It didn't feel crowded at all. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any restrictions on the high platform. The gradually rising noise in the hall and the gazes of the cultivators looking at them were clear. Seeing everyone land on the high platform, Hermit Yu Hong's heart calmed down. He smiled and raised his hand to Old Man Wen, fellow Daoist Wen, please sit, oh? Old Man Wen looked at Xiao Hua, who was still standing, and seemed to understand something. He smiled and said, Hermit, there's no need to be so polite. Since you're here, you don't need me to be a witness. If you have something to say, please. Good. Hermit Yu Hong clapped and said, I like straightforward people like fellow Daoist. Since that's the case, I'll make it clear. I want all the methods of selecting spiritual roots and all the methods of cultivating spiritual root. If that's the case, then it's easy. Old Man Wen also smiled. Then my Wen family wants him. Daoist, are you sure? Hermit Yu Hong asked, didn't this unknown Daoist not say how he obtained this cultivation technique? Are you sure he modified it? Daoist. Hermit Yu Hong nodded. I just want to remind Daoist that this chi refinement technique is very mysterious. It's definitely not something a nascent soul cultivator can modify. I'm afraid that even a spirit-severing cultivator wouldn't be able to modify it. Old Man Wen replied. He looked at Xiao Hua and the others and said, since things have come to this, I'm willing to do some things that I usually don't want to do. Since fellow Daoist has already made his choice, then I'm speechless. As long as fellow Daoist is not afraid of being cheated. Hermit Yu Hong shrugged and looked at Xiao Hua. You can take out your techniques now. Xiao Hua looked at Yu Hua and ordered without hesitation, give it to them. Yes, senior. Yu Hua felt wronged, but she still took out the jade slips from her storage ring. Hermit Yu Hong was not satisfied. He looked at Liu Qingyu and Nuo Yeqing and said, where are the storage rings of these two little friends? Liu Qingyu said angrily, we've already taken out our techniques. Senior, don't push your luck. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Qingyu, give it to them. Give your storage rings to them. Yes, senior. Liu Qingyu didn't understand. He bit his lip, but still took out his storage ring and threw it to the golden core cultivator next to him. Yu Hua and Nuo Yeqing didn't say anything. They took off their storage rings and handed them over without hesitation. As disciples of small sects, they clearly knew that when comparing their lives to their storage rings, their lives were naturally more important. A wise man submits to circumstances. Fellow Daoist is indeed very good at it. Hermit Yuhong laughed as if he was mocking and praising. Seeing that Xiao Hua and the others were very tactful, Old Man Wen was secretly happy and asked Hermit Yuhong, "Fellow Daoist, can we leave now?" Hermit Yuhong nodded. "Of course. You and I both got what we needed. I don't want to offend the Wen clan, so we can leave." "Very good." Old Man Wen cupped his hands and said, "I'm very satisfied with today's trip to Xiahong Mountain. When I return, I'll definitely report it to the clan head. In the future, if fellow Daoist passes by my Wen clan, there's no harm in coming to Wen clan as a guest." "Haha, well said, well said." Hermit Yuhong stood up and cupped his hands. "I hope fellow Daoist will have the chance to come to my Xiahong Mountain again in the future. I came and went in a hurry today and didn't properly entertain you." After bidding farewell, Old Man Wen said to Xiao Hua and the others, "Everyone, please follow." Unfortunately, before Old Man Wen could finish speaking, the entire high platform began to shake. Hundreds of green pillars of light flashed across the space several hundred meters to the left of the high platform. These pillars of light were like a whirlwind that swept towards Xiao Hua and the others from all over the high platform. Moreover, within these green pillars of light, strands of black and white light blossomed like an epiphyllum. As the halos blossomed, layers of runes rushed out of the void like waves and landed on everyone's bodies. Damn it! Old Man Wen only felt his body tighten. Where the runes landed, not only was his physical body imprisoned, even his nascent soul was restrained. How could Old Man Wen not know that he had fallen into Hermit Yuhong's trap? He angrily cursed and was about to slap his own head. At the same time, a black and white halo flashed and a crack appeared in the void. A heavy pressure descended from the sky and with a flash of light on the stage, Old Man Wen and the others were teleported out. However, after the light and shadow flashed, ripples appeared on the high platform again. One by one, lifelike phantoms appeared in an instant. It was no different from the previous one. Moreover, the strange thing was that Old Man Wen led Xiao Hua and the others in a very courteous manner as they bid farewell to Hermit Yuhong. Then, they flew into a door at the top of the hall and disappeared in an instant. Everyone! When Xiao Hua and the others' phantoms disappeared, Hermit Yuhong waved his hand. A golden core cultivator walked to the front of the platform and said, "My master originally wanted to punish the people of the Chan He sect, but for the sake of that fellow Daoist, he didn't pursue the matter. The Chan He sect has already left behind the cultivation method. My master will carefully refine it and then sell the real cultivation method at the Jingpeng Hall. Please wait for the news." Seeing the farce come to an end like this, the crowd of qi condensation cultivators had their suspicions, but there was nothing they could do. Muttering among themselves, they slowly dispersed. In just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the square that was filled with people earlier had become sparse. Perhaps in a few days, no one would remember what happened here today. Xiao Hua and the others had fallen into Hermit Yuhong's trap and were sent out of the platform. Old Man Wen saw the light flicker and the heavy pressure disappear. He secretly prepared to counterattack. However, before the pressure of the teleportation disappeared, a huge force appeared in the air and dozens of 30-meter-wide vortexes appeared. Aside from Old Man Wen, none of the cultivators were able to resist the suction force of the vortexes and were sucked in. Old Man Wen regretted it and opened his mouth. A pillar of green light shot out and a fist-sized golden hammer fell into the air. When the hammer fell into the air, the space around it began to distort. Old Man Wen chanted, "Go." The golden hammer rushed above Old Man Wen's head and with a loud bang, the vortex collapsed. "Fellow cultivator Wen is being naughty." Hermit Yuhong's laughter came from the vortex. With a flash of light, Hermit Yuhong appeared. Hermit Yuhong grabbed with his hand and the entire space rumbled. A several-meter-wide ceiling force appeared and firmly grabbed the golden hammer. Swoosh! A strange whirlpool appeared under Old Man Wen and sucked him in before he could even struggle. Clap, clap. Hermit Yuhong clapped his hands lightly, and several waves of magic power rushed into the void. After the vortex transformed, the figures of dozens of imprisoned cultivators were revealed. Damn it! The female cultivator named Jinga cursed, "You dare to plot against us? You really don't want to live. Of course this old man wants to live. And I want to live freely." Hermit Yuhong shrugged and replied elegantly, "This old man's auction house has been open in Xiehong Mountain for over 1,000 years. I've seen many disciples of aristocratic families who think too highly of themselves like you. It doesn't matter if your family is here or not." Hee hee. Old Man Wen laughed. "Hermit Yuhong, this old man advises you to stop. Not all of my Wen family's disciples are here. Also, this old man will tell you the truth. My family head also knows that we are here. You also saw the message from before. Good boy, you scared me to death." Hermit Yuhong patted his chest and said, "It's just a Chen Immortal Alliance's Wen family. It's at least 40 million li away from my Xiehong Mountain. You want to use a few words to intimidate this old man? Do you think this old man is a chi refinement brat that hasn't experienced anything? P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please subscribe at Chidian. Vote a month, vote a recommendation vote, collect a gift, and thank you for all forms of support." Chapter 4901. Old Man Wen was shocked. He knew that he had been too arrogant and underestimated Yuhong Mountain's methods. He also underestimated Yuhong Mountain's ruthlessness. However, he still didn't understand how things had developed to this point. Everything before, wasn't it fine? Hermit Yuhong. Old Man Wen narrowed his eyes and looked at Hermit Yuhong. He said word by word, "I don't understand. I only took the disciples of the Chan sect away and they left behind their cultivation methods. Why did you still attack? Even if you're not afraid of my Wen family. I don't understand. You're only a spirit-severing cultivator. With your Xiehong Mountain's power, how could you be a match for my Wen family? Ha ha ha, are you confused?" Yuhong Mountain looked at the famous family's disciple being played in the palm of his hand. He felt a rare sense of satisfaction and laughed wildly. "Fellow Daoist, you've underestimated the cultivation method I brought." Xiao Hua seemed to have also been restrained by the Yuhong Mountain people and was unable to move. At this moment, he spoke indifferently. Old Man Wen was even more confused and asked, "Didn't you already give him the cultivation method?" If it was Yu Hua from before, she would be as confused as Old Man Wen. However, after hearing Xiao Hua's explanation, she already understood the meaning of the cultivation method. She couldn't help but say, "Senior, you're a family's disciple. Of course you only want to take the cultivation method back to the Wen family, but if you were to broaden your horizons, what if you were to give this cultivation method to even more sects?" Yuehua's words exposed the truth and Old Man Wen immediately understood. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "I understand. Yuhong Mountain, you want to give this cultivation method to the Chu Pu Immortal Alliance. No, you want to give this cultivation method to the Dao Alliance. Damn it, no wonder you're not afraid of my Wen family's revenge. No wonder you want to kill us all. Ah, Dao Alliance." Of course, Yuehua's vision wasn't as high as Old Man Wen's. She was just reminding Old Man Wen, but Old Man Wen was able to guess the intentions of Yuhong Mountain Man. His words shocked Yuhua. Yuhong Mountain clapped and said, "There are indeed many smart people in this world. Moreover, there were more intelligent people in aristocratic families. Others only pointed it out a little, but you actually guessed this old man's plan in an instant. Since all of you already know about it, then I won't hide it from you. The method to select and cultivate spiritual roots is simply too important. All of you only know how to exchange these for crystals, but you don't know what you'll get if you offer these things to the Dao Alliance. Since you don't know, then this old man will do it for you. However, since I'm going to give this to the Dao Alliance, there's no need for you to exist." Chan He sect. Liu Qingyu's face was pale as he immediately thought of Chan He sect. Sure enough, the Yuhong Mountain Man looked at Xiao Hua and the others and said, "As for the Chan He sect, you don't have to worry. I heard that Liu Hanhuan just destroyed the Flying Shadow sect. The sect master of the Flying Shadow sect had many friends when he was alive. I think his friends will avenge him, right? Shameless bastard." Old Man Wen was furious. His body shined with a green light and the light rushed out from his dantian. It quickly penetrated his body and condensed at the top of his head. Hong! A clear sound came from the top of Old Man Wen's head. Then a pillar of light shot into the sky and a 5-foot nascent soul wearing spirit armor flew out. This nascent soul held a golden red spear that was a few feet long. As it landed in the air, a sorrowful aura filled the area. Ha ha ha! Seeing the golden red spear tremble and ready to stab at him, the Yuhong mountain man laughed and said, "You're only a nascent soul cultivator and you dare to be arrogant in front of this old man? Today, I'll let you see. So what if you're from a cultivation family? So what if you're from a cultivation sect? In front of strength, everything is nothing." As he spoke, Hermit Yuhong didn't activate any divine abilities. He merely waved his sleeves. Woo! A chilly whirlwind appeared out of thin air, and a strange beast that was only a foot long flew out. This beast was like a monkey. Its entire body was black and there were countless strange runes on its almost hairless body. The rune gave off a dark green luster as the beast appeared. As the luster flashed, the beast's body began to grow rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the beast grew to several dozen feet. However, what shocked Old Man Wen was that although it grew, its body became thinner and didn't have the muscles of a normal beast. Moreover, the beast's eyes released a ghostly light. When his nascent soul saw the beast, it couldn't help but feel fear. "Soul-devouring monkey?" A surprised voice came from the distance. Xiao Hua could clearly hear that it was Nuo Yeching's voice. The soul-devouring monkey's body condensed and it bared its fangs in excitement. Then it turned to look at the nascent soul. Not good. Old Man Wen was shocked and wanted to withdraw his nascent soul before it could use any spells. Unfortunately, at this moment, the soul-devouring monkey opened its mouth and let out a few roars. Its body drew a strange arc in the air and immediately pounced at the nascent soul. Before the beast could get close, its aura had already spread and caused Old Man Wen's nascent soul to feel powerless. Damn it! This old man will kill you. Seeing that the nascent soul was showing signs of collapsing and that he couldn't control it, Old Man Wen was shocked. He let out a scream and spat out a mouthful of blood onto the nascent soul. The nascent soul's eyes released a bloody light. At this moment, a rather dull voice sounded, "Sigh, forget it. Fellow Daoist Wen, you don't have to probe any further. Since we've already spoken up to this point, this humble Daoist already knows the intentions of the people of Mount Yuhong. He has operated the auction house of Mount Yuhong for 1,000 years. He must have done many such heinous things. Today, let him pay the price for his mistakes." Ah! Hermit Yuhong was astonished and looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. He only saw Xiao Hua's hands move gently. Crack, crack, crack. The shackles binding Xiao Hua shattered as though they were real ropes. It didn't take much effort at all. Then Xiao Hua opened his mouth and let out a roar, "Break." The soul-devouring monkey's body trembled as if it had met an invincible king. Its body quickly shrunk and not only did it shrink to a few feet, it even knelt in the air and didn't dare to move. Its body was still trembling uncontrollably. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe at Chijian, vote for it, give it a tip, and Chapter 4902. Following which, Xiao Hua waved his right hand, and the arm fell into the void. Mountain Man Yuhong felt a huge force coming from his chest out of nowhere. He didn't dare to be careless and didn't have time to counterattack. He urged his body and was about to teleport away. At the same time, he opened his mouth and spat out a palm-sized khaki-colored shield. The khaki-colored shield emitted a rumbling sound as it rapidly expanded in the air. In just a few breaths of time, it was over 100 feet tall. The shield shone brightly, and countless runes swam about madly. A thick, vast, and indescribable aura spread out in all directions. Hermit Yuhong's figure quietly retreated under this thick aura. However, just as Hermit Yuhong's figure disappeared under the yellow light, there was a loud bang and a small fist appeared in front of the rapidly expanding shield. When the fist struck, there was a thunderous rumble. Not only did space shake, but even the shield was shattered into pieces. The pieces were like snow, like Hermit Yuhong's heart that had fallen into a freezer. The pieces were like stone, like the shock of Old Man Wen and Company. This was a treasure refined by a spirit-severing cultivator. How could it be so easily destroyed by a fist? Moreover, it wasn't just destroyed, it was shattered. It shattered the treasure's body. Not to mention the amount of magic power contained in the fist, just the strength and toughness of the fist was far from what Old Man Wen and Company could imagine. However, that was not the end of it. Cough. Hermit Yuhong, who had disappeared, trembled slightly. There was a muffled sound that sounded like a cough. His silhouette appeared for a moment. Everyone could clearly see that Hermit Yuhong's face had a hint of redness. Clearly, he had suffered some internal injuries when his Dharma treasure was destroyed. While he was coughing, the fist that had just shattered the Dharma treasure came crashing down with a loud bang. However, this time, the movement was very light. With a soft sound, Xiao Hua's fist passed through the sky and appeared beside Hermit Yuhong. It hit Hermit Yuhong's figure that was about to disappear again. Ah! Hermit Yuhong let out a tragic cry. The half of his body that had disappeared rapidly solidified. When Hermit Yuhong stood in midair and lowered his head to look at his abdomen in disbelief, he could no longer stand in midair. He fell like a rock. This Old Man Wen was dumbfounded. He could clearly see that in that split second, Xiao Hua's punch had shattered Hermit Yuhong's dantian. If nothing unexpected happened, Hermit Yuhong's nascent soul might not have been preserved. Otherwise, Hermit Yuhong would not have lost his dharmic powers and fallen into the void. Not only was Old Man Wen dumbfounded, but the disciples of the Wen family were also dumbfounded. This was a spirit-severing cultivator. Although he was a rogue cultivator, his magic power was real. With just one punch, everything was over. A fist could shatter magic treasures, but could a fist shatter a nascent soul? This was simply unimaginable. While everyone was in a daze, Xiao Hua raised his hand again and broke Liu Qingyu's restriction. Then, Xiao Hua looked at Old Man Wen and smiled. This old man can save you, but you have to help this old man do something. Senior has already saved this junior. Old Man Wen did not dare to be negligent and quickly said with a smile. Hehe, you're quite tactful. Xiao Hua raised his hand again and tore Old Man Wen's restriction apart. He said, you can deal with Hermit Yuhong as you wish. Give this old man 70% of Xiehong Mountain's profit. He, as long as Senior nods, my Wen family will only take 20%. Old Man Wen was overjoyed and smiled. Senior, please wait here for a moment. This junior will be back soon, Xiao Hua nodded. He looked around and raised his hand to point at the void. Pa! Like a bubble bursting, the void in front of everyone collapsed, revealing a magnificent palace. Xiao Hua looked at the Yuhong mountain man who had fallen to the ground like a dead dog. Disgust appeared in his eyes. He flew to the high platform at the head of the hall and sat down firmly. Yu Hua, Liu Qingyu, and Nuo Yeqing also flew down. Old Man Wen ordered a few disciples to accompany them below the high platform. He raised his hand and grabbed Hermit Yuhong in his hand. He bowed slightly to Xiao Hua and flew out. After the space shattered, the soul-devouring monkey naturally fell from the array. At this moment, it was still trembling in fear and curled up into a ball in the air. Xiao Hua looked at the soul-devouring monkey, then looked at Nuo Yeqing, and muttered in his heart. Although Xiao Hua didn't know the name of the soul-devouring monkey, he already knew that this soul-devouring monkey wasn't a demonic beast, but a rare soul beast. He did not understand how Nuo Yeqing, who was in Foundation establishment, knew. Nuo Yeqing saw that Xiao Hua was paying attention to her, so she simply walked forward and bowed. Senior, can you give this soul-devouring monkey to this junior? Yeqing, you seem to have a lot of things that you haven't told this old man. Xiao Hua smiled. Liu Qingyu also glared at Nuo Yeqing and said, Little brat, how many secrets are you hiding from this master? Senior Zhong, master. Nuo Yeqing smiled bitterly and said, It's not the time to explain this matter. If there is a chance, this disciple will definitely report it. I hope that the two seniors will not force me. Hearing Liu Qingyu berate Nuo Yeqing, Xiao Hua immediately thought of his master's helplessness. Wasn't it because of this that he hid his cultivation from his master? Therefore, Xiao Hua did not even think and replied, Okay. As long as you feel that you have the ability to bear this secret, then bear it yourself. There's no need to report it to us. Hehe, master, you see, even Senior Zhong said so. Nuo Yeqing said to Liu Qingyu with a mischievous smile. This old man is so angry. Liu Qingyu did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at Xiao Hua and said, Senior spoils him too much. He. Xiao Hua did not say much and shouted at the soul-devouring monkey, evil creature, come here. The soul-devouring monkey trembled and hurriedly flew over, landing pitifully in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua pointed at Nuo Yeqing and said, This is your new master, you will follow him from now on. This old man knows that you must have helped the Avilders before, follow your new master in the future. At this point, Xiao Hua could not help but secretly laugh. How does this soul beast know how to help the Avilders? What's the use of saying so much to him? It's better to just believe Nuo Yeqing. Go. Xiao Hua did not say anything and just said to Nuo Yeqing. The soul-devouring monkey was a soul beast. Although Xiao Hua did not use the green seal text, his voice also had the power of the soul. After the soul-devouring monkey heard it, it obediently waved its little paw and landed in front of Nuo Yeqing. Nuo Yeqing hugged the soul beast with both hands. It was very strange. The soul-devouring monkey liked Nuo Yeqing very much. It was somewhat resistant to Nuo Yeqing's hands, but when Nuo Yeqing hugged it, it actually tilted in Nuo Yeqing's arms and lay down. I'm afraid this strange beast is fated with you. Xiao Hua said seriously, I hope that you can use this strange beast to do the things you like to do, and I also hope that these things are what this old man wants to see. Even if this old man can't see you in the future, I hope that the things you do will be worthy of your conscience. Yes, this junior understands. But please rest assured, senior. Nuo Yeqing happily bowed and kowtowed. Afterwards, Xiao Hua sat cross-legged on the jade chair and closed his eyes to meditate. Liu Qingyu guarded Xiao Hua's side while Nuo Yeqing hid to the side and played with the soul-devouring monkey. Yu Hua walked over and whispered something to the Wen family disciple. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, old man Wen went out for 2 hours and did not return. Liu Qingyu was somewhat worried and whispered, Senior, should this junior go out and take a look? No need. Xiao Hua did not open his eyes and replied, Do not doubt the people you use, do not use those you doubt. Yes. Liu Qingyu did not dare to say anything else. Then, after waiting for another hour, old man Wen hurriedly entered the main hall alone. The old man walked to the bottom of the high platform and bowed, Junior Wenjin greets Senior. Xiao Hua opened his eyes and asked, Ian, thank you for your hard work. How did it go? Reporting to Senior. Wenjin hurriedly took out a dozen thumb-sized storage rings and respectfully handed them over. He replied, This is what I found in the cave residence of the Yuhong Mountain Man. Please check and accept it. This old man will not look carefully. Take what you should take and give the rest to this old man. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Yes. Wenjin took out 2 storage rings and handed the majority of the storage rings to Xiao Hua. You've given this old man too much. Xiao Hua said with a smile. No. Wenjin said with a smile, This junior will only give Senior a little, not a lot. Senior, please take them first and listen to this junior's explanation. All right. Xiao Hua was not polite. He raised his hand and threw 3 storage rings to Nuo Yeqing, Liu Qingyu, and Yu Hua. He kept the rest. The scale of Xiehong Mountain's auction house is beyond this junior's expectations. The wealth of Yuhong Mountain's people is even more beyond this junior's expectations. Wenjin said in a timely manner, previously, this junior was only following Senior's instructions and swept away all of Yuhong Mountain's people's things. However, when this junior saw Yuhong Mountain's people's arrangements, this junior had another idea. That's why this junior wasted so much time. Oh, do you want to take over this auction house? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Wenjin nodded and said, Senior is right. This Xiehong Mountain's auction house has existed for thousands of years and has always been very prosperous. Even though Yuhong Mountain's people are no longer here, this auction house should still be here. Therefore, this junior wants to use Senior's name and my Wen family's name to continue operating this auction house. Of course, This junior does not dare to make a decision based on senior's proportion. After obtaining senior's consent, this junior will report to my family's head. Wen-zhen. Xiao Hua's lips curled into a light smile. He looked at Old Man Wen and said, "It seems that you haven't told this old man about your background yet, right? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please go to Chijian to subscribe to support, vote for a monthly vote for a recommendation vote, collect a gift, and thank you for all forms of support."